Chapter 1108. As the crowd dispersed, Qin Gong glanced at the couple who had been beaten to the point of being bloody. With his excellent eyesight, he could tell that the couple was badly beaten, but their bones were not injured. Only their skin and flesh were bruised. It was painful, but it was not fatal. If 50 strokes of the board were to fall on a person's body, not to mention an ordinary couple, even a martial artist would lose his life. As he was thinking, Qin Gong felt someone tugging at his sleeve. He saw a 7 or 8-year-old girl standing beside him. Her hair was tied into a bun, her chubby cheeks were pink, and her eyes were clear like flawless jewels. The girl wore a blue and white scholarly robe, and an exquisite token hung on her waist. She did not look like she was raised by an ordinary family. "Why are you pulling me?" Could it be that this 7 or 8-year-old girl wanted to marry him? Qin Gong laughed involuntarily at his own imagination. The girl spoke clearly, "Little brother, please help me give these to them." Qin Gong took it and found that the things in the bags were medicine for treating external injuries. Apart from the medicine, there was also a small bag of copper coins. "Who are you to them?" Qin Gong asked curiously. The girl glanced at her parents who were pushing the responsibility, crying and insulting her. Her calm gaze was mixed with some complexity. The nursery was divided into male and female sections. The female servants who took care of them did not hide anything from them. Many girls knew from the moment they could remember that they were abandoned by their parents. They did not have parents, but they had brothers and sisters in the nursery and the governor who protected them. Unrelated people. Qin Gong was surprised, vaguely guessing the girl's identity. He was about to sigh at the girl's filial piety when she said, "If you die here, it will inevitably damage the governor's reputation. In other words, if you die, you should at least die far away." Qin Gong. Children these days were all smart. Qin Gong played the good guy for once. He threw the medicine and the bag of coins to the couple. "You're the child from the nursery?" Qin Gong returned to find the girl still in the same place. The girl nodded, then shook her head. She pointed at the token hanging on her waist and proudly puffed out her flat chest. "I'm a student of the Golden Scale Academy now." The nursery imitated the Golden Scale Academy in setting up 2 sections for males and females. Apart from studying, males and females were separated for other activities. The girl was a Class D student, and her grades were second only to Class A. This time, the Golden Scale Academy expanded its enrollment, and there were a total of 300 more places. The infant nurturing hall was fortunate enough to occupy 50 places, and the little girl relied on her own abilities to take one of the places. That day, she packed her things and moved to the Golden Scale Academy. Halfway through her journey, her things were stolen by this pair of parents. She was almost scared to death. After calming down, she dealt with the parents while trying to find a good opportunity to escape. It was this experience that completely cut off her desire for the word parent. What did they mean when they said that if she was filial to them and helped her younger brother and older brother, they would find a good marriage for her in the future? What did he mean by saying that they were the ones who treated her the best in the world? Yet he was secretly slandering the prefecture overseer. If he really treated her well, would he have sold her to the nursery? After the girl learned to read, she looked at the record of her parents selling her to the nursery. The record described in detail the process of her parents selling her to the nursery, including her words and actions, expressions, and the reason for selling her. Did they really think she was illiterate and didn't know anything? Judging from your accent, you don't seem to be a local of Xiangyang district. But you speak elegant words so well, you shouldn't be an ordinary person, right? Elegant words were official language. Many people spoke official language with a local accent. Unless they had studied it seriously and systematically, it would be difficult to speak so accurately. Qin Gong was secretly surprised. The little girl in front of him was actually testing him? Sure enough, she had become a spirit. "I'm from a foreign place. I'm here to look for someone," Qin Gong said. "I'm looking for the registrar of Wanzhou, Xueqi." Except for Xueqi, the chief butler, who was a fixed NPC, the others were free to do whatever they wanted. They were often dragged by Jiang Pengji to battle everywhere. If Qin Gong wanted to see Jiang Pengji, he had to find someone who could speak to her. It was not easy to find others, and Qin Gong was not sure if they were in Wanzhou, so he could only find Xueqi. The girl was shocked. "Are you a relative of Registrar Su?" Qin Gong shook his head. He said, "No, I was entrusted by someone to bring a letter to Registrar Su. Although Qin Gong was only 18 years old, he had a lot of foresight. He did not directly state his purpose. Instead, he said that he was here to deliver a letter to Xueqi. The girl said, "Look at you. I'm afraid you won't be able to see Registrar Su." How could an ordinary person meet a registrar of a province? Qin Gong laughed bitterly. He said, "I was planning to try my luck. Maybe the gatekeeper would be willing to help me deliver a message." Of course, the possibility of being kicked out was higher. Qin Gong had no proper documents on him other than the secret letter. He could not prove his identity. The girl thought for a while. She said, "Is the letter urgent?" Qin Gong said, "It's very urgent. I know a way. Maybe it'll be faster," the girl said. "But if you lie, you'll lose your life." The girl was now a new student at the Golden Scale Academy. She could pass a message to Feng Yi, who was a senior. Feng Yi was the son of Feng Bi-che. Although he was the son of an official, he was gentle and well-mannered. If what Qin Gong said was true, Feng Yi should be willing to help. Qin Gong said without changing his expression, "Of course it's true." The girl was lucky. When she arrived, Feng Yi had just finished school. "Why are you looking for me?" The girl explained the purpose of her visit. Feng Yi frowned slightly and asked about Qin Gong's behavior and appearance in detail. "I'm afraid you've been deceived. Registrar Su's family has been in Wanzhou for many years. How could there be a letter from outside?" The girl's face paled when she heard this. "But I'd like to meet this person. You've just entered the Golden Scale Academy. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." Feng Yi got up and called for her attendant. Ever since the incident of the girl being stolen, the Golden Scale Academy and the nursery had increased their security. As the son of an official, Feng Yi's security had also increased by several levels. She was not allowed to travel alone, and she was not allowed to meet strangers alone. She had to bring 1 or 2 guards with her. Qin Gong waited at the agreed place. After a long time, he did not see the girl. Instead, he saw a handsome young man dressed in blue and white clothes. It wasn't quite accurate to call him a young man. He was between a boy and a teenager. He looked frail, had elegant features, and had an excellent temperament. As soon as he saw Feng Yi's attire, Qin Gong knew that the blue and white school uniform was the standard appearance of a student of the Golden Scale Academy. "What's your purpose in coming to Wanzhou? If you can't give me a reason, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to go to prison." Feng Yi sat down and looked straight at Qin Gong. "Don't you know that there's no one in Registrar Su's hometown? It's even more impossible for there to be any letter from home," Qin Gong asked. "And who are you?" "Feng Zhen is my father." Qin Gong's expression froze. He seemed to be doubting Feng Yi's identity. "I want to meet Registrar Su." As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Yi's gaze became a bit more fierce. Still not willing to tell the truth? Qin Gong grinned inwardly. Oh my! Could it be that this teenager in front of him had also become a demon? Chapter 1109. Meet the Lu Prefecture Overseer? Who is your master? Feng Yi's eyes were slightly closed, and her tone was calm. At such a young age, she already had a calm demeanor, as if she would remain unfazed even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her. "I have to see Governor Lu first, or at least Registrar Su." Naturally, confidential matters couldn't be casually spoken of. Why should I tell a kid who's still wet behind his ears? Qin Gong was annoyed that he had been fooled by a teenager. Feng Yi was calm and collected. She looked at Qin Gong with ripples in her eyes. "You entered the city alone, so the secret letter must be on you. If you insist on not telling me, I'll throw you into prison later, and I'll naturally be able to search your body for it. Whether you say it or not is not up to you." Qin Gong almost choked on his own saliva. The child in front of him was not only a demon, but also a 1,000-year-old demon. Before Qin Gong could speak, Feng Yi continued, "Of course, if you can produce something that can prove your identity, then I'll believe you for now." First, she provoked and angered him. Then she comforted him gently. Feng Yi was especially good at using this method of giving a sweet date after a slap. He was not purposely making things difficult for Qin Gong. It was just that Qin Gong was acting suspiciously and his intentions were unclear. If he didn't ask clearly and Feng Yi recklessly introduced him to Xueqi and the others, what if something happened? If what Qin Gong said was true, why did he have to stammer on such a question? Logically or emotionally, Feng Yi had to understand the situation before making the next judgment. Qin Gong replied, I don't have anything on me that can prove my identity. He was afraid that he would fall into the enemy's hands and expose his identity, so other than the secret letter from Su Fei, he did not bring anything else. As soon as Qin Gong finished speaking, he saw Feng Yi staring at him with a faint smile. I won't say anything about this. I won't say anything about that. You say you're not a suspect, but ask yourself, do you believe it? Qin Gong's face turned red and he gritted his teeth. At this time, Feng Yi stood up from her seat and made to leave. Wait, you can't go. Feng Yi turned her head and said, I won't search your secret letters. Qin Gong, I'll tell Registrar Su about your matter. Just stay in prison and wait for news. Qin Gong. He felt that he could still save them. Why was this brat in front of him so hard to deal with? How hard was it to help him bring a message? Moreover, if Feng Yi didn't bring Xueqi a message, would he have to stay in prison forever? What if we delay the Lord's important matters? Before Qin Gong could say anything, Feng Yi seemed to have seen through his doubts. I'll tell Registrar Su about this. If you really are a messenger from one of the feudal vassals, wouldn't I be held responsible for not delivering the message? Qin Gong's face turned red. Then I'll wait for your news in prison. Feng Yi smiled and nodded. Okay. Qin Gong obediently went to the cell and squatted there. Separated by the bars, he anxiously watched Feng Yi leave. Feng Yi left the prison and saw a familiar figure squatting not far away. She was shaking her head and muttering something. Listening carefully, it turned out to be the lesson that the teacher was teaching today. He laughed involuntarily and called out from afar. Chongqing, are you playing truant again? The girl in the Golden Scale Academy's female uniform heard the noise and suddenly turned her head. She ran in front of Feng Yi with small steps. I heard that you're in prison, so I came to take you out. If Uncle Feng knows that you've committed a crime and are in prison, he won't let you off easily. I'm obviously here to save the day, but you say that I'm playing truant. Chongqing added, I've asked for leave from the teacher. Feng Yi's curled lips froze for a moment. She grumpily produced a stir-fried chestnut. Do you know what false rumors mean? I only sent someone to prison. How did it become me being locked up in prison? Chongqing muttered. What did that person do wrong? A person who was personally sent to prison by Feng Yi was definitely not an ordinary person. Feng Yi briefly explained. Chongqing tilted her head and thought for a while. She blinked in confusion. Is this person's brain made of elm? You have to inform Registrar Su, but he doesn't have to stay in prison. He can stay outside and wait for news. Feng Yi could not help but laugh. His brain is indeed a bit elm, but it's also cute. From his appearance and words, I can tell that he's a martial artist. There's a faint bloody aura around him. I've only seen this kind of temperament on a few military uncles. People like that are always hot-tempered and easily angered. But facing my coaxing, not only did he not get angry, but he also obediently fell into my trap. He's unexpectedly likable. Chongqing uttered a disdainful ah. Young brother Feng likes to bully people more and more. He even bullies honest people. Bullying was fine, but he even coaxed people to go to prison. How much hatred was there? I've never bullied you. Feng Yi pinched Chongqing's nose. I can't even wait to coax you. It was fine for others to criticize others, but if they criticized the person in front of her, golden beans would fall. Feng Yi went to find Xueqi and sent Chongqing back to the mansion. Go back and do your homework. When I come back, I'll check. If you're wrong, you'll be punished to do the martial arts squat and copy the wrong words. Chongqing pouted and muttered, This is what you said when you said you've never bullied me. It was obvious that she was the one who was bullied the most. He was stricter in her studies than her father. If she didn't do well, she would be punished to do martial arts squats and practice writing. When Xueqi heard that Feng Yi had something to see him about, he found it funny. I don't know what it is. Let him in. Registrar Su, I found a person with strange movements today. He claimed to be a messenger sent by another feudal lord. However, when I asked him who the lord behind him was, he didn't give me any details. Feng Yi told him everything about Qin Gong in a low voice, without hiding anything. A trace of a smile appeared on Su Ming's solemn face. You mischievous boy. It's his bad luck to meet you. Feng Yi said disapprovingly. That person's martial arts skills are not low. If I don't coax him to go to prison, I'm afraid it won't be safe. I'm afraid that someone who's willing to be coaxed to go to prison is not an evil person. After all, he couldn't do anything bad with that little bit of intelligence. Xueqi ordered someone to bring Qin Gong out of prison. Qin Gong stayed in prison for more than an hour. When he came out, he felt that his body was stained with an unpleasant smell. Thank you. Seeing Xueqi, Qin Gong shed tears of gratitude and immediately dispelled his suspicions. He only felt that Feng Yi was stubborn but kind inside. She was quite likable. Feng Yi nodded from afar. The conversation that followed was confidential. It was not suitable for him to listen in. Xueqi asked Qin Gong, "Who is your lord?" Facing Xueqi, Qin Gong did not hide anything. My lord, Su Fei, specially sent Qin Gong to deliver a secret letter to the magistrate of Liuzhou. It was actually Su Fei's man? Xueqi was in a trance for a moment. He suddenly remembered what Jiang Pengji had said a while ago. Su Fei's messenger would arrive in Wanzhou in a few days, and he was told to be careful. Presumably, the messenger that the Lord mentioned was this person in front of him? Where is the secret letter? Chapter 11:10. Qin Gong was a stubborn man. Su Fei instructed him to hand it over to Jiang Pengji personally, so he refused to hand it over to anyone else. Xueqi looked at Qin Gong with a smile. He vaguely understood why Feng Yi was teasing Qin Gong. The people under the Lord's tent, from the civil officials to the military generals, were basically white and black. Now that there was someone who was the purest and most pure, wasn't that something new? In that case, Ku will write a letter to inform the Lord of this matter. Qin Gong shook his head and declined. This matter is of utmost importance and cannot be delayed. Registrar Su, why don't you arrange some people so that I can personally deliver the letter? With that, Qin Gong's eyes revealed a pleading look. It would be a waste of time for Xueqi to write to Jiang Pengji. Qin Gong recalled the smell of blood that day and the white cloth wrapped around Su Fei's hand. He vaguely guessed that the secret letter in his bosom was most likely a letter written in blood. If it wasn't an important matter, who would mutilate themselves and bleed to write a letter of blood? Xueqi thought about it and agreed to Qin Gong's suggestion. If that's the case, I'll send someone to escort the messenger. Qin Gong was flattered that Xueqi was so easy to talk to. He thought that he would be rejected by Xueqi before he could see Jiang Pengji. He said gratefully, "Thank you, Registrar Su." As an omnipotent butler, Xueqi was naturally capable. In the time it took Qin Gong to drink half a pot of tea, he had already prepared everything. Attendants, horses, carriages, food, and even a set of formal attire for meeting Jiang Pengji had been prepared. Qin Gong expressed his gratitude again, but he did not notice that Xueqi was looking at him with pity and sympathy. What a pity! He's an abandoned pawn. Xueqi looked in the direction where the carriages had left and let out a sigh that was carried away by the wind. Abandoned? How did that person become an abandoned pawn? Feng Yi was waiting outside when he heard that Qin Gong had left. He went out to take a look and happened to hear Xueqi sigh. Xueqi came back to his senses and looked down to meet Feng Yi's puzzled gaze. If there were no accidents, Feng Yi would basically be the next generation's leader and the future young master's most reliable right-hand man. No matter if it was Xueqi or the others, they all had high hopes for Feng Yi and often gave her guidance. I heard that Su Fei is in dire straits recently. The generals under his command have been killed one after another, and his territories have been lost one after another. Now he is imprisoned, and his fate is about to run out. Although Qin Gong was young, he already had the demeanor of a general. What was more commendable was that he was loyal to Su Fei. Although I haven't seen the surface of such a character, I've seen a bit of it. Xueqi chuckled and carefully guided Feng Yi. Tell me, is it more important to deliver the letter or your own life? Dispatching a general as a messenger and neglecting his own guards, what is Su Fei planning? There was no need for a general to personally deliver a letter. After Feng Yi heard this, it was as if she was suddenly enlightened. A look of realization appeared on her sickly face. Registrar Su, you mean to say that Qin Gong isn't just an abandoned pawn, but a gift from Su Fei to the prefecture overseer? Xueqi sneered. Rather than a gift, it's more like a bargaining chip. Feng Yi's heart turned cold and she was momentarily speechless. Putting himself in her shoes, if he was used as a bargaining chip by the person he was loyal to and sent to the opponent's side, how disappointed would he be? Xueqi saw Feng-yi deep in thought and smiled. This is just a speculation. Only the Lord knows the truth. Feng-yi shook her head. What Registrar Su said makes sense. It's mostly true. Although Xueqi stayed in the rear all year round and hardly fought with the army, no one dared to look down on him because of this. Whether it was the small Xiangyang district in the past or the huge territory now, Xueqi could manage them in an orderly manner. Without him to stabilize the rear, Jiang Pengji couldn't have led the army to attack the northern borderline and Songzhou. Wars were fought fiercely, but it was still peaceful under her rule, as if it was a prosperous and peaceful era. Take a chestnut, her father, who was such an unrestrained person, wouldn't take the initiative to provoke Xueqi. It was evident from this. Of course, Su Fei isn't a fool. He won't directly say that he's giving it to you. If he says that, Qin Gong won't truly pledge allegiance to the Lord. The Lord will also alienate Qin Gong. That won't be good. Xueqi smiled. There are still many ways to learn. Watch more, learn more, and think more. Feng-yi bowed and thanked him. Thank you, Uncle Su, for your guidance. Xueqi was speechless. You're so reserved and polite. You don't seem to be from Feng Zisher's family. You seem to be from Feng Huayu's family. Feng-yi smiled shyly. At that moment, she finally looked like someone of her age. In the orange afterglow, Feng-yi didn't go home. Instead, she went to Feng Jin's house to check on Chongqing's homework. 1/3 of Chongqing's enlightenment was taught by Feng Jin, 1/3 by the Golden Scale Academy, and the remaining 1/3 by Feng-yi. However, the person Chongqing was most afraid of was Feng-yi. Feng Jin could act coquettishly, the headmaster of the academy could act cute, but Feng-yi could only do her best to accept her punishment. She nervously sat upright, her 2 plump hands clutching the fabric on her knees. Her round eyes stared at Feng-yi's eyes. If he raised his eyebrows, she would show a fearful expression. Her little heart was in her throat. Do you want to copy until the end of the year? After a while, Feng-yi put down the notebook. Chongqing's little heart was in her throat. You have to copy all the circled wrong words. 1 word 100 times. Feng-yi added, copy with the martial arts squat. Chongqing let out a howl. 18 wrong words in 1 essay. 1 word 100 times. She couldn't even eat dinner at the end of the month, let alone tonight's dinner. I'll copy with you. Is that okay? Feng-yi said, I'll copy as much as you copy. Chongqing saw that there was no room for negotiation. She could only accept her punishment. Careless and overconfident are conceited. Now that you feel that you're being punished to copy too much, why don't you check it again? Chongqing pouted her mouth and opened her watery eyes, not daring to refute. Seeing this, Feng-yi frowned slightly. This wasn't like the Chongqing he knew. As the previous generation started their own families, Feng-yi's generation slowly increased. However, he was the one who played with Chongqing the most and understood her the best. Did the servants in the mansion neglect you? No. If there is, just tell me. I'll help you get rid of them. If it doesn't work, find an excuse to stay at my house for a few days. Feng-yi's expression was calm. He steadily took a horse stance. His wrist was extremely steady. He lifted the brush and dropped it. His handwriting was as clear as his own. It already had a certain natural charm. You're the elder sister now. You should show the bearing and skill of an elder sister. People change. You can't stay the same all the time. They won't continue to indulge you just because you're young, because your second brother is younger than you. Before Feng Jin was dragged to Cangzhou by Jiang Pengji, Wei Jingxian successfully had a second child. After Cangzhou ended, the second child was born. Feng Jin and Wei Jingxian were not people who valued sons over daughters. However, their youngest son was young, so they had to spend more energy to take care of him. With Chongqing's sensitive personality, it was impossible for her not to notice the difference. I didn't. Chongqing pouted. She was just annoyed by the servant's private chatter. Since you didn't, then you should learn well. Out of the corner of his eye, Feng-yi saw that she had written another wrong word. His eyebrows twitched and he said seriously, Your father and mother are busy. The situation outside is not peaceful. They probably won't be able to take care of your second brother's enlightenment in the future. In the end, Won't they still have to rely on you? But with your ability to enlighten others, it's good enough that you haven't led them astray. Young brother Feng, then in the future, when you have a younger brother, you teach him well and raise him into a talent. Don't let father harm him. Chongqing was speechless. Chapter 11:11. Young brother Feng is indeed a good brother. After Feng Yi's explanation, Chongqing's gloomy mood eased a lot. Sure enough, those talkative maidservants still needed to be taught a lesson. Don't always talk about trivial things. As she thought of this, she suddenly remembered a servant girl's idle chatter. That servant girl had been bought into the manor for half a year and was now 13 years old. Some maidservants thought that Chongqing was young, so they would take advantage of her nap and talk about some private topics. At first, they only talked about young talents. After 2 years, they would occasionally mention Feng Yi, who often visited. If I can get young Lang Junfeng's favor, I might be able to get a title in the future. Come on, title. You can't even be a Tongfeng. Why can't I be? Young Lang Junfeng doesn't have a legal mother to teach him, so he doesn't know anything. If I can get first place. Little girl, you can daydream. Chongqing was absent-minded and accidentally made a mistake. Chongqing, what are you thinking about? Chongqing came back to her senses and said with a smile, I'm thinking about young brother Feng's Tongfeng. Feng Yi's hand tightened, and the tip of the pen dropped a lot of ink on the paper. His expression became very serious. What Tongfeng? Where did you learn this from? Chongqing didn't know why, nor did she know why Feng Yi was angry. Feng Jin's backyard was very clean. He didn't even have a Tongfeng or a personal maidservant, let alone a Tongfeng. She didn't know what a Tongfeng was, but from the tone of the maidservants, she guessed that it was something good. Bai Xing and the others said that they wanted to be young brother Feng's Tongfeng. Feng Yi put down the pen with a snap. The ink on the tip of the pen splashed, and the paper that was half written on was completely ruined. They're just a few lowly maidservants. Are they worthy of Xiao Feng? Feng Yi's weak face was filled with anger. Chongqing was frightened and couldn't help but shrink her neck. He saw that Chongqing was frightened, so he softened his expression. A Tongfeng is an anonymous lowly concubine. Chongqing understood the term lowly concubine because it was mentioned in books. She couldn't help but frown in confusion. It's so strange. Why would anyone want to be a lowly concubine? Feng Yi was unable to answer this question. However, he felt that the servants and maids around Chongqing needed to be cleaned up. It was one thing for them to be talkative, but they were actually talkative in front of Chongqing. Chongqing was still young and was at the age of vigorous learning. If her temperament was affected by their words, would they be able to bear the consequences? Feng Yi's aura was somewhat heavy. Chongqing did not dare to provoke him at all. In the next hour, she concentrated on copying and barely managed to finish 2 pages. As soon as she finished copying, the servant informed her mother that she had returned from the government office. Feng Yi stopped writing, tidied up her appearance, and went to see Wei Jingxian. She heaved a sigh of relief when the little devil who was in charge of Chongqing left. She plopped down on the mat and massaged her sore legs from squatting. The wind is the rain, Chongqing muttered. You were fine just now, why are you so angry all of a sudden? Just as Wei Jingxian was asking the housekeeper about the 2 children, the servant reported that Feng Yi had arrived. Let him in. Wei Jingxian smiled and asked Feng Yi for the purpose of her visit. She and her husband Feng Jin liked this junior very much, not only because he was precocious and well-behaved, but also because he treated Chongqing very well. He liked to play with Chongqing wherever he went, which greatly made up for the couple's negligence when they were busy with work. Feng Yi hesitated for a moment and suggested to Wei Jingxian in a low voice that she should clean up the maids and maids who served Chongqing. What did they do wrong? Wei Jingxian asked. Feng Yi explained the reason with slight embarrassment and added, Chongqing is still young and easily influenced by the outside world. Her temperament has changed. These days, she has been absent-minded. I also suspect that these maids said something in front of her and caused Chongqing to misunderstand. He said it very vaguely, but Wei Jingxian heard the underlying meaning. She originally had a faint smile on her face, but now it was completely gloomy. Her right hand grabbed the armrest of the table and unconsciously tightened its grip. That night, Wei Jingxian boldly punished a few maids, and the commotion alarmed Feng Jin. She told Feng Jin about it, and the latter was silent for a long time. "What are you thinking about, husband?" Wei Jingxian asked. "I'm thinking about Chongqing," Feng Jin said. Unknowingly, the baby girl in the swaddling clothes is already so big. The thought of her getting engaged and married after she reaches the marriageable age makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm afraid that she will marry the wrong person, but I'm also afraid that she will not have a good life after she gets married and her husband's family will bully her. The corner of Wei Jingxian's mouth twitched, and she could not help but remind Feng Jin. "How old is Chongqing?" "She is still far from the marriageable age." "It's not early." Feng Jin's face was gloomy. He had been avoiding thinking about this problem. But wasn't that deceiving himself and others? Instead of thinking about it after Chongqing reached the marriageable age, it was better to start picking now. Firstly, there was plenty of time, and secondly, he could be strict. If it was too late, the good seedlings would have been picked, and who would care about the rest of the ugly ones? Wei Jingxian was helpless and could only let Feng Jin be immersed in this meaningless dilemma. After a while, Feng Jin tried to ask, "Jingxian, what do you think of Sun Lan from Sun Wen's family? She has a soft and humble temperament, which is not bad." The key was that their ages were similar to Chongqing. Chongqing had been spoiled by him to the point of being arrogant and willful. She was a good match for Sun Lan, who had a soft temperament. "Sun Lan, she is good, but isn't she too soft?" Wei Jingxian thought of Sun Lan's appearance. She was too shy, like a delicate flower that was kept by Sun Wen. He scratched his head and thought of another candidate. The eldest son of Cui Yu, the master of Chongzhou's Cui family, is also not bad. His background is a little poor, but he is easy to deal with. I saw him at the Golden Scale Academy a few days ago, and he seems not bad. However, the style of the Cui family's merchants is too strong, and I don't like it. Feng Jin racked his brains and named a few candidates. Most of them were famous gentry families within the borders of Dongqing. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that they were full of flaws. Wei Jingxian was annoyed by his words and said, "No matter how good these juniors are, they are not as good as Feng Yi." Feng Jin's expression froze. But Feng Zisher's behavior. Feng Yi was publicly known to be good, but his father was publicly known to be unrestrained. Every family would have to think twice before marrying their daughter. Feng Jin could tolerate Feng Zhen's unruly behavior because of work, but since the two families were in-laws, it was hard to say. "Let me think carefully about this matter." According to Jiang Pengji's current family business, in the next few years, she would be conferred the title of Joshi. It was a sure thing that she would become a king. As long as the next generation did not make any big mistakes, it would not be a problem to keep the family business. As the leader of the next generation, how could Feng Yi's status and prospects not be bad? According to his analysis of the Lord's thoughts, the Lord was determined to eliminate the old gentry families and promote the commoners. In this way, the shortcomings of Feng Yi's background would not be considered as shortcomings. In addition to his indulgence and care for Chongqing, he seemed to be a good candidate for a husband. After thinking for a night and a days, Feng Jin became more and more conflicted. Wei Jingxian sighed helplessly. When it came to the matter of Chongqing, Feng Jin's IQ dropped sharply, hovering on the edge of passing. Nothing had been set in stone, but he was already worrying about what would happen in the future. Wei Jingxian got up to wash up and went to the government office to take attendance. She did not know that Feng Jin had done something. He felt that he could try Feng Longzi's words and let his son be his son-in-law. Feng Zhen was speechless. Chapter 11-12. When he heard Feng Jin's hint, Feng Zhen's first reaction was to look at the sun outside. Did the sun rise from the west today? Feng Jin actually wanted to be in-laws with him? Didn't this person hate his style the most? Feng Zhen's heart was in turmoil, but he pretended to be flattered. If Feng Jin hadn't mentioned it to him, he would have forgotten that Feng Yi was 11 this year and the marriage was only 2 years away. He was busy fighting a war and there were no women in charge in the manor. No one could help Feng Yi find a wife. Feng Jin's initiative was exactly what he wanted. Feng Zhen had no objections and even wanted to raise both his hands and feet in approval. Feng Jin was from the Feng family. Did he need to question the upbringing of the Feng family's women? He had seen Chongqing before. She was cute, lively, and well-mannered. He had wanted to steal her home and raise her as his daughter several times. No one knew a child better than a father. He knew that not every child could play well with Feng Yi, let alone raise her as a sister or daughter for a long time. Now that they had such a good relationship, they could treat each other respectfully when they grew up. It was better than a blind marriage. Feng Zhen's quick answer made Feng Jin hesitant. A gentleman's word could not be taken back. He couldn't take back what he had said. But he didn't say anything definite. He only said that the two families had a good relationship and the two children could play well. If they liked each other when they grew up, it would be good for the two families to be in-laws. Of course, if the children were not suitable when they grew up, the two families would marry on their own. That day, Feng Zhen was all smiles, as if he had picked up a few hundred taels of gold. When he returned to the manor, he accidentally saw Wan Xiu'er in the courtyard with a maid cleaning the cotton. He felt even better. The beauty was pleasing to the eye. His good mood seemed to be magnified, multiplying exponentially. But Feng Zhen knew to avoid it. He glanced at her and then went to the main hall without disturbing her. When Feng Yi came back from school, Feng Zhen guided him in his homework and said happily, "Father found you a marriage today." Feng Yi stopped writing and looked at Feng Zhen expressionlessly. After a while he asked, "Father drank again today?" "Just 2 glasses." Feng Zhen blurted it out. When he came back to his senses, he said with slight embarrassment, "Do you think I'm such an unreliable person? How could you be booked out just because of a few glasses of wine? You're already 11, it's not too early to talk about marriage. The marriage I've arranged for you today will definitely be the best. There are too few daughters of important officials under Master's banner who are of the right age." Frowning, Feng Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Is it Uncle Qiguan's Jinghui?" Considering her temperament, family background, and age, Qiguan Rang's eldest daughter, Qiguan Jinghui, was the most suitable. "So you like the Qiguan family?" Feng Yi said mercilessly, "Uncle Qiguan's family background isn't high, and our family can be considered to be in decline. In terms of family background, the difference isn't that great. In terms of age, Jinghui is only 4 years younger than me. In terms of temperament, only Uncle Qiguan could tolerate father's wanton and unrestrained behavior. He had taken a liking to our family. If there really was a candidate, the possibility of it being Jinghui was very high. Isn't it Jinghui? The Book of Rites says, those who are ignorant of etiquette will combine the good of 2 surnames to serve the ancestral temple and help the future generations." This was a very serious matter. Marriage also had to be considered in many aspects. Although Feng Yi was only 11 years old, he didn't just think about liking or hating someone. Feng Zhen was speechless at his son's words. "It really isn't. Then who is it?" Feng Yi asked. "The little tail that follows behind you all day, the baby of the Feng Jin family," Feng Zhen said. Feng Zhen said, "Feng Jin and his wife are both beautiful. Chongqing, that lass, is also clever and cute. When she grows up, she will definitely be a beauty. She has a good relationship with you. After you get married, do you have a token of exchange?" Feng Yi asked. "Not yet." Feng Yi continued with a cold expression, "If that's the case, then it's just a verbal agreement. It may not be valid. Chongqing is indeed young, but you can't look down on her reputation because of this. As for the marriage, let's wait until it's confirmed before we talk about it. If we talk about it now, it'll damage my reputation." Feng Zhen. Had he been taught a lesson by his own son? Feng Yi really didn't take this matter to heart. Chongqing was still young, but this group of unruly adults were so busy. He really didn't know what they were after. Unknowingly, Feng Jin and Feng Zhen felt like they had been shot in the knees. There were 2 sides to the conversation. Feng Zhen and his son argued with each other. On the other side, Qin Gong, a young military officer, was also nervous and uneasy. The weather was hot and the mountain roads were dry. In addition, there were several official roads that connected various places. It took him a short 3 days to reach the capital of Shangjing. After a round of reporting, he finally received an invitation from Jiang Pengji to meet the rumored only female feudal lord, Lu Shi. Qin Gong didn't dare to raise his head to look directly at her. Instead, he respectfully took out the tube bag that Su Fei had handed to him. Wei Ci took the tube bag and passed it to Jiang Pengji. She violently tore open the string and took out the 2 secret letters inside. The audience in the streaming room was so bored that they wanted to scratch lice. They never expected an unfamiliar young man to appear in the streaming room. Naturally, Qin Gong's appearance was excellent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been proposed to by so many young ladies. Coincidentally, Qin Gong's appearance was that of a cheerful and energetic young man that many people liked. His first appearance stirred up 1,000 ripples. Fairy Queen's crimson. I'm crying out loud. Finally, there's a new guy. He looks so clean. You woo. One's appearance comes from one's heart. His temperament is indeed clean, as if he saw a small sun. He's different from those black-bellied people. Xueqi. Little brother, are you married? Do you need a hostess? I can steal Li Xian's black card to support you. Gay Imei. Tisk to the commenter above, I can sell everything I have to feed a handsome man, but don't steal my husband from me. Zhang Pengji was not in the mood to pay attention to those jokers. She knitted her brows and looked at the 2 letters of blood that were mixed with cinnabar and did not speak for a long time. Qin Gong's mood gradually sank with her indifference. After a while, Zhang Pengji put down the 2 letters. What's your name? Qin Gong sat upright and respectfully reported, I am Qin Gong, courtesy name Feng Jing. Zhang Pengji said, being courteous means being respectful. Obeisance means being obedient. Who gave you this name? Qin Gong looked at Lian Nen and reckoned that she wasn't even 20 yet. My deceased father gave it to me. Zhang Pengji was stunned for a moment. She frowned and handed one of the letters of blood to Qin Gong. Your lord wrote 2 letters of blood. One is for me, and the other is for you. Take a look and give me an answer later. Qin Gong did not understand. His pure eyes were filled with confusion and doubt. Why did his lord give him letters of blood for no reason? Why didn't she give it to him in person? Instead, she asked him to send it to the magistrate of Liuzhou? Qin Gong picked up the letter of blood with doubts in his heart and slowly rolled up the bamboo slip. He read it word by word. His face, which had some color just now, immediately turned as white as a sheet. This. Chapter 11:13. The blood letter on the bamboo slip in his hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. It fell to the ground with a thud, making a dull sound. Half of his body on the ground, the young man's slightly thin shoulders trembled. The audience, who had been sucking up to the young man's good looks, was stunned. Did the streamer bully the young man? Yi Wu Yanling. What's wrong with the young man? He doesn't look like he's smiling, he's clearly crying. Ye Jingjing. Pull out the 40-meter-long sword. Who bullied the young man? The 85 troops in the streaming room won't forgive him. To me. Streamer, can you ask the young man why he suddenly cried? Zuzi Chuai. The poor thing is crying like that. His heart is broken. Some of the audience comforted him, while others looked for the reason for Qin Gong's sad crying. In ancient times, men were particular about bleeding but not crying. If they were not extremely sad, they would not cry in front of others, let alone a general. They would rather die standing than live kneeling. Crying was sometimes more shameful than living without purpose. Zhang Pengji stood at the door and looked out. She considerately left some space for Qin Gong and some dignity for him. Following the clues, the audience quickly focused their attention on the blood letter left by Su Fei for Qin Gong. Xingyue Tunyun. Streamer, you've read the 2 blood letters. What's in the one you left for Qin Gong? Qin Gong was so sad after reading the blood letter that he could not control himself. Who would believe that it was not the blood letter? Zhang Pengji crossed her arms in front of her chest and stood outside the elegant main hall of the provincial government. Wei Ci followed a step behind her. Neither of them spoke. The audience was helpless. They could only work together to find the truth. For a moment, Sherlock Holmes, Edagawa Conan, Robin, and other detectives appeared one after another. The entire streaming room was filled with inferences that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Some of the audience's inferences were very close to the truth, while others had wild imaginations. They were as funny as they could be. After a while, the young man's hoarse and suppressed voice came from the main hall. Magistrate of Liuzhou. Zhang Pengji returned and sat on the seat of honor. I was overwhelmed with emotions and couldn't control myself. I've embarrassed myself in front of Magistrate Liuzhou and Mr. Wei. Qin Gong had already wiped away the tears on his face, but there were still traces of tears on his cheeks. The tip of his nose and cheeks were dyed with an abnormal redness. His eyes were bloodshot, and his temperament was pitiful. It made people's maternal instincts explode. They wanted to rush out of the screen and hug him in their arms to comfort him. Zhang Pengji was still expressionless. If she showed any sympathy or pity, it would be a heavy blow and humiliation to Qin Gong. "Have you read your lord's letter?" Qin Gong's body stiffened for a moment, and he could only squeeze out 3 words after a long while. "Yes, I have." Zhang Pengji lowered her eyes and sighed. "Do you know that he has no other choice? The enemy was strong while he was weak, and there was nothing he could do to save himself. Thinking about the past, he felt that he had let down his father and brother. Now, I don't want to implicate you. Without your talent, I don't want the bloodline of the Qin family to end." Qin Gong broke down in an instant. Tears welled up in his eyes and refused to fall. He choked with a sobbing voice and said, "I wish I could imitate my father and brothers and willingly fight until the last drop of blood for my lord. Although I am still young, I know the word loyalty and filial piety. Why would I abandon my lord in danger for my future, life, and bloodline?" At the end of his sentence, Qin Gong's voice broke, and hot tears streamed down his cheeks. It was like a young beast crying blood, and it made people's hearts tighten. Zhang Pengji and him only had a few sentences in their conversation, but the audience had already imagined the entire plot. Yeguru porridge. Ah, cutie. Was he abandoned by his lord? Ingluo. It seems so. His lord knew that he was going to die, so he deliberately asked Cutie to send him away? Chinching gorilla. Hee hee. I bet on the streamer's integrity and shamelessness. This matter is definitely not that simple. You are loyal, and he must know this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entrusted such an important task to you. Qin Gong burst into tears again. The last time he cried was when he was setting up a cenotaph for his father and brothers. After the bloody battle, not even their corpses were left. He was the only one left in the family to shoulder the burden. Zhang Pengji asked him to pass the remaining blood letter to Qin Gong. This was written by Su Fei for her, but Qin Gong was fine after reading it. Qin Gong endured the pain in his back as he opened the blood letter with trembling fingers. The image of his lord bending over the table and writing seemed to appear in his mind. Although he did not let it go, he stopped crying. After a while, he bowed to Zhang Pengji. His tone was stiff and difficult. "Forgive me for my rudeness. May Magistrate of Liuzhou. Give me a night and give me an answer tomorrow." "It's all right." Zhang Pengji was very tolerant. After Qin Gong left, Zhang Pengji said, "Although I have done many schemes in exchange for sincerity, this is the only time I feel guilty." Wei Ci smiled faintly. "It's enough that my lord has a clear conscience. You feel guilty, but it's nothing more than Officer Qin's pureness. He can't bear to do it." Zhang Pengji said, "This Su Fei is also considered an expert in psychological attacks. The first is to attack conspiracies, the second is to attack friends, the third is to attack soldiers, and the third is to attack cities. Psychological attacks are the top, and attacking the city is the bottom. Psychological battles are the top, and military battles are the bottom," Wei Ci replied. "It's really embarrassing to say such things too clearly. Su Fei wants to be strong for a lifetime, so he has to leave some leeway and face for himself. If he doesn't do this, Qin Gong won't completely pledge allegiance to my lord, and Su Fei won't be able to get any benefits." In the blood letter that Su Fei left for Qin Gong, there was no mention of him selling Qin Gong to Zhang Pengji as a bargaining chip. Instead, every word was written with Qin Gong in mind. He recalled the friendship between him and Qin Gong's father several times, and then thought of Qin Gong's eldest and second brothers dying in battle for him. He could not bear to see the bloodline of the Qin family being destroyed. He saw that Qin Gong was extremely talented and had a promising future, so he thought of ways to find a way out for Qin Gong. The blood letter he wrote to Zhang Pengji was the same. Su Fei did not directly state his purpose. Instead, he recalled the situation of the alliance meeting at Xueqi, and imperceptibly shortened the distance between them. They were obviously only friends, but in his words, they were very close. After recalling, he did not tearfully complain about how badly he was bullied by Su Bei. Instead, he talked about how good Qin Gong was. He hoped that Zhang Pengji would let bygones be bygones and put Qin Gong in an important position. He was a good seedling with good roots. If he was put in an important position, he would definitely make great contributions to Zhang Pengji. He was so certain that he thought highly of Qin Gong. He wrote it with such sincerity that Qin Gong naturally felt sad and touched. His lord always planned for him and considered for him, but he could not stay by his lord's side and shed his blood for her. How could he not cry? Only then did the audience realize what had happened. Their hearts felt heavy. Wenmia Zhangxi, I originally wanted to be loyal to the ruler, but the ruler sent me away. Little brother, I feel wronged for you. Wei Xi saw that Jiang Pengji was deep in thought. He asked softly, Is my lord thinking about Field Officer Qin? No, I'm thinking about you. Jiang Pengji said, If I end up in the same situation as Su Fei one day, I will kill you with my own hands. Chapter 11:14. In the ancient times, some people were so old-fashioned that they were detestable, some were so innocent that people pitied them, and some were so stubborn that it made people sigh. After Jiang Pengji changed her attitude, she enjoyed everything more. Should you send someone to keep an eye on Qin Gong? Are you worried that he will take the opportunity to commit suicide? Jiang Pengji asked. Wei Xi nodded in affirmation and said, Don't worry, this fellow is not that weak. The most valuable quality he has is the word, loyalty. After reading Su Fei's letter, he won't seek death. Wei Xi thought about it and suddenly felt that his suggestion was a little funny. Indeed, his suggestion just now was belittling Qin Gong. My lord is right. I was wrong. In the previous life, when Su Fei killed Su Bei, Wei Xi had yet to enter Jiang Pengji's camp. He was sacrificing his life for An Chui in Nanxing. However, he knew a little about Su Fei's situation. In the previous life, after Su Fei was killed by his cousin Su Bei, his general Qin Gong's whereabouts were unknown. His corpse was hard to find. Everyone thought he had died in the battle to break into the city. The truth was that Qin Gong had been shot by more than 20 arrows and had almost lost an arm. He climbed out of the pile of corpses with difficulty. He went to search for Su Fei's bloodline. Heaven rewarded those who persevered. He finally found Su Fei's eldest daughter in an abandoned well. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. Apart from the eldest daughter, the others were born of a concubine. After the city was breached, the enemy troops rushed into the city like locusts. Su Fei's 3 sons and 3 daughters, as well as his wives and concubines, fled under the protection of the guards. Unfortunately, they encountered the ruffians and died after being humiliated. Only the eldest daughter took the opportunity to escape. She leaped into the dry well and luckily did not die. She endured for 2 days and 2 nights without food and water. Finally, Qin Gong arrived. Although the eldest daughter was alive, she had lost a leg and half of her face was ruined. Half of her face was as beautiful as a peach blossom, while the other half was as ugly as a ghost. Qin Gong rescued the bloodline of his former master and brought her to live in seclusion in a remote village to find a good opportunity for revenge. About half a year later, Su Bei was killed by the emperor. Qin Gong paid the price by swearing loyalty to Jiang Pengji in exchange for his former master's remains. He buried Su Fei's remains in the Su clan's territory. It was worth mentioning that Qin Gong married Su Fei's eldest daughter in the end. Although the woman was injured and could not bear children, Qin Gong did not take a concubine or take another wife. Instead, he adopted a son and changed his surname to Su. His loyalty to Su Fei was not the least bit fake. Because of this, Su Fei's actions in this lifetime made Wei Xi sigh even more. How pitiful was it to be wrongly entrusted with loyalty. Jiang Pengji's gaze fell on him. Then, what is Zixiao thinking about? I'm thinking about my lord, Wei Xi said. A scholar will die for his bosom friend without regrets even if he dies 9 times. To be able to have such a master, Ci is very fortunate. My only wish. All the regrets in his previous life had finally been fulfilled in this life. For no reason at all, the originally hungry audience let out a loud burp. The two of them were facing each other. Couldn't they just say whatever they wanted to say? Why were they thinking about each other? Xiao Pan, mercilessly kick over this bowl of sweet dog food. How dare you force it into the baby's mouth? Lu Ling, the streamer and Beauty Ci have both changed. In the past, Beauty Ci was so cold and aloof. Now, he is showing off to the dogs with the streamer. Wu Jiang. The entire street exudes the sour stench of love. Only the baby exudes the fragrance of a single dog. The bullet screen was full of ghostly wails and howls. Jokes of ridicule and blessings covered the huge screen tightly. Yusue Jueo, if the streamer and Beauty C's marriage doesn't be broadcasted live, everyone will climb the internet cable and hack them. Xinyue, wait for the streamer to cook Beauty Ci, this bronze and iron frog? Eri Yukiding. Xinjia, wait for my grandson to tell me that the streamer I've been following for decades is finally going to hold a wedding? Indifferent face JPG. Jiang Pengji and Wei Ci teamed up to bully the single dog. On the other side, Qin Gong tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He was experiencing a war in his heart. On one hand, it was his loyalty to his lord. On the other hand, it was his lord's entrustment and ardent expectations for him. For a moment, the two thoughts were entangled and could not be separated. Under the torment, time passed like a year. When the sky turned white, Qin Gong appeared in front of Jiang Pengji with a pair of puffy eye bags and dark circles. Qin Gong, you've been thinking for the whole night. Have you made up your mind? Jiang Pengji was dressed in a plain shirt. She had no makeup on, and her face was healthy. She looked more natural than usual. Even though Jiang Pengji was wearing a woman's shirt, Qin Gong could always feel an inexplicable deterrence from her when he saw her. This was a power that only someone who had been in a high position for a long time could have. Qin Gong's cheeks were pale and bloodless. As if he had experienced a difficult struggle, he suddenly bowed down and kowtowed. General Qin Gong greets the new lord. Jiang Pengji revealed an unsurprised smile. Qin Gong's choice was also within her expectations. Su Fei was done with his performance. It was her turn to appear next. Su Fei and I are allies. We were considered comrades in the past. Now that he's in prison and is in a precarious situation, I can't bear to see him. After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, Qin Gong's face gradually revealed a look of ecstasy. She acted as if she did not see it and continued. Su Fei wrote a book in blood. Every word he wrote was filled with blood. No one could not be moved. Considering our friendship in the past, I can't leave him in the lurch. Qin Gong, listen to my orders. Qin Gong gestured to accept the order. General Qin Gong, listen to your orders. Deploy 10,000 troops to Hu County immediately. Qin Gong was so happy that he was almost speechless. His hands that were cupped in a fist were trembling like a sieve. General, listen to my orders. In the end, Jiang Pengji sighed and added, Fengjing, it's not that I don't want to deploy more troops. It's just that the battle at the northern borderline last year and the battle at Songzhou this year have depleted too much. Now that the troops and horses are exhausted, there's not much left in the grain depot. Otherwise, I would definitely. At this point, Jiang Pengji paused. She frowned, as if she was really in a difficult position. Qin Gong, who had finally calmed down, could not help but feel excited again. 10,000 troops and horses are enough. I thank my lord for your kindness. After Qin Gong retreated, Jiang Pengji saw that a bullet screen in the streaming room had become a hot topic. Herbivores Wuzzy, the little cutie is no match for the two drama queens working together. Su Fei attacked Qin Gong's heart and Jiang Pengji fooled him. The two of them made a deal. Qin Gong did not even have a chance to fight back. My husband by Fei Fei. You gave him 10,000 troops and horses directly? The new general has to be tested, right? Although the audience sympathized with Qin Gong, they were all staunch streamers. Everything was based on Jiang Pengji's interests. Of course, Jiang Pengji would not be so straightforward. Although Qin Gong was the commander, Jiang Pengji had also sent people to him. Yang Si was the military advisor. Chang Yuan and the military supervisor were to assist Qin Gong. Yang Si, who had just been emptied, was speechless. There was no end to it, was there? In contrast, Chang Yuan was excited. He finally did not have to stay in the rear to deal with government affairs or help his father write books. As the son of Chang Chang, Chang Yuan was born in a scholarly family, but he also had the heart to fight on the battlefield. Upon receiving the order, Chang Chang brought his second son over for a good lesson. Chang Yuan had a lot of theoretical knowledge, but he had no actual combat experience. He had to follow Yang Si as his leader. He had to learn humbly and ask for guidance. In the face of his old father's earnest teachings, Chang Yuan naturally agreed. There's another point. Your eldest brother is currently working under Su Pei's camp. Chapter 11:15 Cheng had 2 sons and a daughter. His eldest son was an official in another place. His youngest son, Cheng Yuan, and his daughter had not settled down yet, so they were raised by his side. When the whole family fled Xueqi and county, Cheng took his wife, youngest son, and youngest daughter with him. He didn't have to worry about his eldest son. The eldest son, Chang Sun, courtesy name Gong Luo. After Cheng settled down at Jiang Pengji's place, he tried to write a letter to his eldest son, hoping that he could work under Jiang Pengji. Now that the world was in chaos, it was too dangerous to be alone. Cheng felt that he was getting older and older. He was afraid that he would never have the chance to see his son again. Unfortunately, Chang Sun was a staunch supporter of the landed gentry, and had always been disdainful of interacting with the commoners. Jiang Pengji's position between the gentry and the commoners was too obvious. She was born in the gentry, but she supported the poor. It was a disgrace, so Cheng Sun directly rejected Cheng Cheng's suggestion. At that time, Cheng felt that something bad was going to happen. After so many years, the youngest son was actually going to oppose the eldest son. When Cheng thought of this matter, he felt deeply uneasy. He was not in the mood to work, and from time to time, he would be absent-minded. Feng Ran, Yuan Jing, and the others naturally noticed such a small change. Over the years, the few of them would gather together from time to discuss academics, to study and perfect the Golden Scale Academy system and their teaching materials. Based on their friendship, it was reasonable for him to show some concern for his old friend. Master Yuan Jing glanced at Cheng Cheng's face and frowned slightly. He raised his hand and stroked his neatly trimmed beard. This face. He pondered for a while. Things were not looking good. On the other side, Feng Ran had already gotten some information from Cheng. Knowing that he was worried about his eldest son and second son, Feng Ran was stunned. He was the most sensitive about this matter. They were thankful that their eldest son, Feng Gue, had taken on the responsibility of the clan leader, taking care of the clan and had yet to become an official. If Feng Gue also stepped into the muddy waters, the 3 brothers would be a trio of thorns. Both the palm and the back of the hand were flesh and blood. If one of them was injured or died, even the father would mourn inconsolably. Feng Ran had no choice but to comfort him. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. When Fu, don't take it too hard. It was a pity that the world was in chaos. Who knew how many times such a play would have to be performed? The children had all grown up and had their own choices and aspirations. The path of life was chosen by them. Whether it was the road to hell or the broad road, as parents, they had no right to interfere. Cheng looked haggard as he said, "I also want to get over it, but I had a dream last night. My heart still palpitates and feels uncomfortable." Feng Ren asked him, "What dream?" Cheng sighed and recalled carefully. "Then," he said heavily, "I dreamed that I had returned to the old house in Xueqi County. The house had been in disrepair for many years, and only the walls were left. Inside, it was densely covered with spider webs and snakes and insects. Somehow, Ching walked straight to his eldest son's old residence. Through the courtyard door, he saw 2 long worms coiled around a fishnet table in the courtyard. They were both dying. Cheng was not afraid at all. At this time, a 3-headed red-beaked black bird flew in from outside the house. It was about 12 feet long and its wings could cover the sky. It rushed towards one of the heads and pecked at it. Cheng panicked and wanted to hit the strange bird with a wooden stick. At this time, one of the long worms suddenly crashed into the wall. After saying that, he suppressed the palpitation in his heart. After that, Cheng woke up in fright. Feng Ran was puzzled and turned to ask Master Yuan Jing. "I heard that you are proficient in the art of interpreting dreams. How do you interpret this dream?" Cheng also looked at him. Master Yuan Jing thought for a while and asked Cheng, "Are there any differences between the 2 worms?" Cheng said, "They look very similar. If you want to point out the differences, one is longer and thicker, while the other is shorter and thinner." "Which one crashed into the wall?" Cheng carefully recalled. "The thicker one." "After crashing into the wall, you woke up from the dream? Did you see what happened to the long worm?" Cheng said, "I don't know. After it crashed into the wall, half of its body was buried under the wall. I vaguely remember that the strange black bird seemed to want to peck it." After listening for a while, Master Yuan Jing made a conclusion. Find a doctor to prescribe you 2 doses of calming decoctions. Cheng Cheng was speechless. Perhaps Master Yuanjing's words worked, but Cheng Cheng did not feel so bad. Seeing that he was not in good spirits, everyone tried their best to persuade him to stop what he was doing and go home to rest. Tang Yao, Master Yuanjing's student, had been holding it in for a long time. He was absent-minded for the entire afternoon. Tang Yao sent Master Yuanjing back to his mansion. Then he stuttered, "Teacher?" Master Yuanjing's face was calm. He asked calmly, "What do you want to ask?" "Mr. Chang, that dream, it's very likely." "I know," Master Yuanjing said, "but can I tell Wen Fu?" Tang Yao was silent for a while. He had only learned a little about the art of dream interpretation. He learned it from the master out of curiosity. Even he could see that the dream was strange. How could the master not know? He will definitely lose his son within a year, and it will be his eldest son. Looking at Wen Fu's face, the patterns on his son's palace are messy, and there is a fine broken line. The Hall of Tears is sunken, and the color is slightly gray. All of these indicate that his son is in trouble. Also, his dream was that the bird ate the dragon and the snake, and the master lost his son. In the dream, he saw 2 long worms that were covered in scars in the courtyard. Not only was he not afraid, but he also stood up to protect the black bird when it tried to attack the long worm. It was obvious that he knew about it. With such a clear dream, it was no wonder that he felt uneasy. After that, the thick long worm hit the wall and died. I guess the eldest son didn't die in the hands of someone else. It was most likely suicide. Tang Yao was stunned. Can't it be avoided? Tang Yao had been in contact with Cheng Cheng for many years. His respect for him was second only to Master Yuanjing and was on par with Feng Ren. Master Yuanjing said, "Wen Fu's dream, rather than saying it was a sign of something, it was the most obscure worry in his heart." Tang Yao was speechless. "Teacher, you mean? Do you really think Wen Fu doesn't know anything?" Master Yuanjing sighed. "It's because he knows the situation that he had this dream. On the one hand, he knows the current situation, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to face reality. It's useless to say it. Do you think it can change?" Tang Yao said, "Things that haven't happened can always be changed, right?" Master Yuanjing smiled. However, this smile was very different from his usual kindness. There was a hint of sarcasm in it. The crux of the problem isn't whether it can be changed or not. It's whether the person involved can change, Master Yuanjing said. Cheng Sun's temperament is destined to be different from the Lord. That year, Wen Fu wrote a letter to his family hoping that his eldest son would give up his official position and reunite with his family. Did Cheng Sun agree? Do you think the Lord will accommodate Cheng Sun, get close to the aristocrats, alienate and suppress the poor? Or will Cheng Sun change his original ambition and suddenly get close to the poor? Tang Yao felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Master Yuanjing continued, "It's because Wen Fu knows the standpoint and ambition of his 2 sons that the 2 long worms fought in his dream. In the end, both of them were defeated. Lu Shi was powerful. Although Su Bei had the strength to fight, Cheng Cheng was more inclined towards Lu Shi. Therefore, the one who was defeated in the dream and killed himself was the thicker worm. To put it bluntly, this dream was Wen Fu's inner judgment of the situation." Tang Yao was speechless for a while. He mumbled, "No wonder," Master Yuanjing said. "Although the dream can be a sign, it's more like the other side of the human heart." So, it wasn't the dream that predicted that Master Cheng would lose his son. Instead, it was his inner belief that he would lose his son? Chapter 11:16. Yang Xi and Chang Yuan, one was a military advisor, the other was a military supervisor. The 2 of them were both assistants and monitors for Qin Gong. Qin Gong was well aware of this, but it did not hinder his gratitude and fondness for Jiang Pengji. 10,000 soldiers and horses, and 10,000 elites with abundant rations and fodder, would definitely be able to save his old master from danger. When Qin Gong met the 2 for the first time, they exchanged names and had a first impression of each other. Initial Qilin shape, "This kid isn't bad." Yang Xi probed Qin Gong with his words. His expression did not change, but he was secretly praising Su Fei's generosity. How could he bear to part with such a good seedling? Qin Gong was still young, but he had his own unique views and style when it came to arranging troops. There were many aspects that even made Yang Xi's eyes light up. Yang Xi felt that he was not looking at a person, but a piece of unpolished jade, which made people itch to look at it. Apart from that, Qin Gong had something else that was very valuable. Loyalty. Which lord wouldn't like a talented and loyal general? Not only did he like it, but he also had more opportunities to render meritorious service than ordinary people. Cheng Yuan didn't feel that deeply, but he was also very sure of Qin Gong. He is indeed a good seedling. No wonder the Lord is willing to trust him. A general who had just defected dared to allocate 10,000 soldiers and sufficient provisions. If this wasn't love and trust, what else could it be? After marching for a few days, Cheng Yuan liked Qin Gong even more. He was strict with the army but not harsh. He listened to suggestions and had his own opinions. Most importantly, Qin Gong was neither conceited nor arrogant. He would not act smart either. Which army supervisor would not like such a commander? Yang Xi was also very worry-free. He had worked together with Jian Yan, this honest and straightforward man, for many years. His patience had been honed, and he was no longer the same as before. Now that it was Qin Gong, he couldn't be happier. Qin Gong sent Zhang Pengji off and set off alone. He could hide from the eyes of Su Pei's scouts by taking a secluded path, but Zhang Pengji had ordered him to deploy 10,000 troops to support Hu County. It would be extremely difficult to conceal the whereabouts of the 10,000 troops. Moreover, ever since Zhang Pengji ended the Cong Prefecture campaign, Su Bei's nerves had been stretched taut. According to Han Yu's analysis, after Zhang Pengji wiped out Songzhou, her next target would be either Huang Song or him. Now that Huang Song and Zhang Pengji had peacefully settled their dispute, they probably wouldn't fight in the near future. Without a doubt, Su Bei would most likely become her next opponent. Su Bei maintained a high level of vigilance throughout. Any sign of Zhang Pengji's troop movements would attract his attention. A few days after Qin Gong's army departed, Su Bei received an urgent secret letter. Lu Lanting just won't stop for a second. Su Pei muttered in a low voice. From his tone, it was unclear whether he was gritting his teeth or heaving a sigh of relief. It was probably the latter. After all, he couldn't stand being tense for a long time. Now that the dust had settled, he felt relieved. My lord, is there any movement from Lu Shi? Hearing Su Bei's mumbling, Cheng Sun, who was seated below, asked. Su Pei replied, according to the secret letter, the reason Lu Shi sent 10,000 soldiers south was most likely because of me. The small feudal vassals in the south of Dongqing had almost been divided up by him and Huang Song. Now, only he and Huang Song were left. If he wasn't going to hit Huang Song, then he was definitely going to hit him. Chang Sun asked again, who is the commander? Su Bei replied, the scouts reported that the commander is a very young general. Chang Sun frowned. The names of the generals under Zhang Pengji's banner had been made public. The only young general seemed to be Li Yun, right? Could it be Li Yun? Li Hanmei? Su Bei denied. No, the commander's flag has the word Qin written on it. Say, when did Lanting have a young general with the surname Qin? Chang Sun replied, he's probably newly recruited. Since Lu Shi dares to let an unknown young general lead 10,000 men as the vanguard, he can't be underestimated. Due to their trust in Zhang Pengji, the outside world had a higher opinion of Qin Gong. I think so too. Lanting's judgment can be trusted. He thought of his right-hand man. Right, has Wen been returned yet? He had been relying on Han Yu more and more over the years, but because of his pride, he didn't want to place all his chips on Han Yu. In order to keep him in check, Su Bei had promoted many virtuous and respectable scholars who had sought refuge with him. If Wei Ci was here, he would know that Su Bei's entourage was rather luxurious, but most of them were supporters of the aristocratic families. Although the commoners wouldn't be discriminated against or neglected by Su Bei, they weren't very useful. They were basically left on the cold bench. Chang Sun replied, military advisor Han is still handling matters in Xueqi County. I estimate it will take another half a month or so. Su Bei frowned after hearing this. He was too reliant on Han Yu. No matter what happened, as long as Han Yu analyzed it carefully, he would be able to clearly understand the inner workings of the situation. It was as if he had taken a tranquilizer. Now that Han Yu wasn't by his side, it would be difficult to find someone to discuss with. Fortunately, these 10,000 men were only the vanguard. Most of them were mainly probing. If they were to fight, it would be a feint. Su Bei wasn't worried that they would be stupid enough to use 10,000 men to fight him head-on. Su Bei said, "If that's the case, we'll discuss this matter when Wenbin returns." Su Bei then found an excuse to leave. Cheng Sun sent him off respectfully. When Su Bei was out of sight, Cheng Sun left the meeting hall. Although it seemed calm on the surface, a turbulent undercurrent was brewing. "Master, why did you come back so early today?" When he returned to the mansion, his wife came forward with a maidservant. She took the cloak he had taken off and asked him in a soft and gentle voice. Cheng Sun replied, "I came back first since there was nothing to do in the meeting hall." His wife was startled. She had shared a bed with Cheng Sun for almost 10 years. She had completely mastered the ability to read people's minds by looking at their faces. Although Cheng Sun didn't seem to be affected on the surface, he must have been suppressing his anger. Could it be that his colleagues had made things difficult for him in the meeting hall? "Don't overthink it. Your husband is fine." Cheng Sun turned around and went to the study. He returned his dinner without even touching a single chopstick. Of course he was fine. Su Bei had summoned him today and mentioned the secret letter. It was obvious that he wanted to discuss this matter with him, but he changed his mind at the last minute. His lord's attitude was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. As an official, he couldn't possibly resent his lord. Instead, he felt that Han Yu was disgusting. After suppressing it for an entire night, he finally managed to endure this matter. Who knew that the next day, Su Bei would summon all the officials to the meeting hall? It turned out that he had received another secret letter. Today's secret letter was obtained by the scouts after they had gone deep into the investigation. They hurriedly sent it over again. Cheng Sun listened attentively for a long time. There were 3 main points in the second secret letter. First, the commander-in-chief's surname was Qin Gong. He was young and probably hadn't been crowned yet. Second, this time the military counselor was an old acquaintance, Yang Si. They had been drinking together a few months ago, but now they were going to turn against each other. Third, this army of more than 10,000 was heading straight for Shanghai County instead of Zhe County. The first and second points were understandable, but the third point was used as the main point. It seemed somewhat unworthy of the name. If one knew that Qin Gong was originally the son of a general under Su Fei's command, then it would be easier to understand. One of the strategists said, "I heard that the bloodline of the Qin family is extremely loyal. Why would they seek refuge with the second master at this time?" The Qin family was considered a vassal of the Su family. Their ancestors had been loyal to the Su family since then. For more than 300 years, there hadn't been a single case of rebellion. Chapter 11:17. Everyone knew that the Qin family held a special position in the Su family. The Qin family was loyal to a descendant who would be the next head of the family. The current head of the family was Su Bei, but the Qin family had always been loyal to Su Fei. Wasn't this a clear slap to his face, announcing to the world that his position as head of the family had been seized through illegal means? Every time he thought of this, Su Bei wished that his grandfather would appear in his dreams in the middle of the night so that he could clarify the situation. As the eldest grandson of the first wife, how was he inferior to Su Fei? It was precisely because of the old man's bias and denial that Su Bei was so eager to defeat Su Fei. He wanted to let the world know that Su Fei was inferior to him. The fact that he was able to obtain the position of patriarch was a well-deserved one. Now, Su Fei was holed up in a corner. Seeing that he could not hold on any longer, Su Bei felt that the rock that had been pressing down on his heart was finally about to be removed. Who knew that an unforeseen event would occur at this moment? Su Bei suppressed the restlessness and rage in his heart and said darkly, "The Qin family is loyal and unwavering." The entire family died in battle for Su Fei, leaving only Qin Gong. Tell me, why did Qin Gong seek refuge with Lu Shi? Why did he receive over 10,000 troops from Lu Shi and head straight to Hu County? The officials bowed down, not daring to look at Su Bei's gloomy face. Regardless of the twists and turns, at least one thing was certain. With Lu Shi interfering in this matter, it would be difficult for Su Bei to kill his cousin Su Fei. One by one, "Are you afraid to speak or do you not know?" Su Pei was so angry that he stood up from his seat, raising his hand to point at the dense mass of officials below. Who would dare to stand out at this time? Cheng Sun even heard someone whispering to the side. If only Han Yu was here. Han Yu's character was rather straightforward. Except for special circumstances, he would usually speak his mind. Although such a character was not likable, he was a good candidate to take the blame at critical times. If he was here, before Su Bei could question him, he would have already thought of a way to extinguish the fire. How would the atmosphere have become so tense? My lord, the crux of this matter is not who Qin Gong sought refuge with, but Lu Shi. Chang soon endured the gazes of dozens of people in the hall and said slowly, "The conflict between my lord and Su Fei can be described as a feud between feudal vassals. To put it simply, it is a family matter between brothers. Logically or emotionally, Lu Shi shouldn't have intervened, let alone helped one side. Furthermore, my lord and Lu Shi have known each other since they were young. During the Huang River Conference, the lord had taken care of her many times. Now, she didn't care about their past relationship and interfered in the lord's family matters. His actions are against justice and justice. To put it bluntly, this person was a busybody. No matter what, Su Bei had taken care of her in the past. Was this how she repaid him? Humans do things." Su Bei suppressed the anger in his heart, but Chang Sun's words were reasonable. He could not refute or reprimand him. Lu Shi. Lu Lanting is a traitor. So what if he does something immoral? Who can control her? Su Bei's words indirectly acknowledged Chang Sun's comments about Jiang Pengji. Chang Sun suggested with a calm expression, "Our lord has ordered someone to send a written demand for an explanation from Lu Shi. It was good that she could retreat. My lord is also in the right if he refuses to retreat." As soon as these words were spoken, Su Bei's expression of anticipation immediately vanished. It was as if a volcano was being suppressed in his eyes. Is this something that can be resolved with a written demand? Su Bei was unable to restrain his anger. He felt that Chang Sun was speaking nonsense and wasting his time in anticipation. Chang Sun was not afraid. Instead, he said calmly, "Lu Shi's intentions are not with Su Fei, but with the Lord. It's just that she has no justifiable reason to attack. If she rashly attacks the Lord, she will bear the stigma of ungrateful. If the Lord loses her cool first, she will have an excuse to attack. Now, she is only interfering in the Lord's family matters and pulling Su Fei along. At the end of the day, she hasn't really." "Say no more. Let me think about this matter." Su Bei interrupted Chang Sun unhappily. Chang Sun could only swallow the words that were stuck in his tongue and silently return to his seat. Given the current situation, a war was inevitable. The only difference was who had the initiative and who had more justifiable reason to attack. Chang Sun was afraid that the Lord would act rashly and give Lu Shi a chance to pick a fight. Su Bei did not want to hear this. He wanted to avoid a war as much as possible. Not long after Chang Yuan sat down, his colleague beside him stepped forward. Replying to the Lord, "I think one thing that Gong Luo just said is very reasonable. Lu Shi helping Su Fei is essentially interfering in the Lord's family matters. If the Lord takes care of this family matter before her vanguard arrives, she will naturally have no other reason to attack again." Hearing this, Chang Sun suddenly clenched his fists and looked at his colleague beside him in disbelief. Lu Shi was determined to fight. How could he stop just because Su Fei was the first to die? If things went awry, he would be attacked from both sides. If the Lord dealt with Su Fei, it might even help Jiang Pengji solve a problem. From Chang Sun's point of view, since a war was going to break out sooner or later, why not take the initiative and make sufficient preparations? Unexpectedly, Su Bei was a little interested in this suggestion. No matter why Qin Gong joined Jiang Pengji's camp, it was partly due to Su Fei's incitement. He was afraid that Su Fei would use Jiang Pengji's power to make a comeback. This was not something he wanted to see. The person who understood you the most was often not a friend but an opponent. The Su brothers were no exception. Su Bei also understood his cousin. Just like how he could not accept his grandfather's favoritism towards Su Fei similarly resented himself for wanting to monopolize everything just because he was the eldest grandson. They could lose to others, but they could not accept losing to their opponents. Does he really think that Lu Shi is his last hope? Su Bei sneered in his heart. His eyes flashed with a trace of scheming. He would definitely not give Su Fei any chance to make a comeback. Su Fei did not expect that Su Bei would disregard the fact that he was from the same clan and kill him. This was beyond Su Fei's expectations, but it was within Jiang Pengji's expectations. Ask her for help? The price was huge. Basically, no one could afford it. Qin Gong led more than 10,000 elite troops to Hu County. On the way, he received a secret report. Su Bei's army had made a move. They had abandoned the siege and turned to attack Shanwu City. If nothing went wrong, Su Fei would at most be able to hold on for another 10 days. Shanwu City's terrain was steep. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. That was why Su Fei could hide there for a while. However, if Su Bei really attacked the city regardless of the price, Su Fei would be able to hold on for at most 10 days. How? When Qin Gong heard the news, he was so shocked that he almost fell off his horse. It was as if all the blood in his body was about to flow backwards. How far is it from here to Shanwu City? Yang Si asked the messenger. The messenger replied, at least half a month. Half a month? There was not enough time. Qin Gong tightened his grip on the reins. The more panicked he was, the calmer his mind became. Military advisor. I want to bring a few men to take a shortcut. If everything goes smoothly, we can shorten the journey by at least 6 days. 6 days. Yang Si was shocked. He said bluntly, does Officer Qin think that I do not understand the 2 counties of Zhujiang and Hu? These 2 areas are vast, comparable to 2 ordinary prefectures. Officer Qin wants to shorten the journey by 6 days. That's a distance of a prefecture. Do you intend to only rest for an hour a day? Even if you can endure it, the troops won't be able to. If we force our way there, we'll just be sending 10,000 exhausted troops to the enemy. Yang Si thought that Qin Gong was a calm and good seedling. Now that he saw it, he was even more reckless than Dian Yen. Dian Yen was slow-witted, but at least he was obedient. He would not go west if he was told to. Chapter 11-18. Although Qin Gong served Jiang Pengji as his master, his heart was still biased towards his former master, Su Fei. Now that his former master was in trouble, how could Qin Gong sit still and continue on his journey? He wished he could grow a pair of wings and fly to Su Fei's side. Yang Si furrowed his brows and asked him, Commandant Qin, are you determined to cast aside this 10,000-strong army and fight alone? Qin Gong was silent for a moment, not knowing how to answer. Even if he rushed to Shanwu City, his body would be close to its limit. What other purpose was there besides sending the enemy's head? If he didn't do that, was he supposed to watch Shanwu City fall and his former master die in the hands of others? He couldn't do that. Yang Si squinted his eyes. Something seemed to be brewing in his calm eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. It was so fast that no one could catch it. When the time was right, Yang Si smiled faintly and said leisurely, I have a plan. I have a plan that might be able to solve this urgent problem. Qin Gong said hurriedly, Military counselor, tell me quickly. If we can solve this problem, you will be my benefactor. Yang Si could not bear to tease Qin Gong, who was so anxious that his eyes turned red. This plan is simple. Yang Si smiled and said, what is false is true, and what is true is false. Our vanguard only has 10,000 people, but it is impossible for Su Pei's scouts to cover the entire north of Dongqing. Why don't we spread false news and fabricate it, making them suspect that the vanguard battalion is just bait to attract their attention, while the real main force took a detour and split into 3, launching a pincer attack on Zhe County. Qin Gong listened carefully, and his eyes brightened. Military counselor, do you mean to let them transfer the frontline troops back to defend and reduce the pressure on Shanwu City? The resources in Shanwu City are still sufficient. It will not be easy to break the city with the steep terrain and natural barriers. If we speed up our march, maybe we can reach Shanwu City before it falls? Yang Si put his hands in his sleeves and smiled faintly. Exactly. This was a good idea, but Qin Gong's smile gradually disappeared when he thought of something else. He frowned and said, Military counselor's plan is good, but Han Yu, Su Pei's advisor, is not easy to deal with. Apart from him, there is also Wu Wei from Jiangding County in Qinzhou. Sir's plan might be seen through in front of the 2 of them. Yang Si's expression was somewhat stiff. Commandant Qin, as far as I know, Han Wenbin is not in Hu County at this time, Yang Si said. Also, what's with the 5 flavors? Qin Gong was puzzled. Are you referring to Wu Wei? It is said that this person is close friends with Han Yu. When the 2 of them work together, it is extremely difficult to deal with them. Qin Gong's father and elder brother had even suffered a loss at the hands of this man. However, in the past few months, there had been no news from the front lines about Five Flavors. It was as if he had disappeared. Xueqi said embarrassedly, "If the 5 flavors you're talking about are sour, bitter, sweet, spicy and salty, that's a nickname I gave myself." Qin Gong. 2 years ago, in order to solidify the alliance between Su Bei and his lord, Xueqi had used their relationship as allies to come up with many ideas for Su Bei's sake. This was to demonstrate their sincerity in forming an alliance. He also wanted to use this opportunity to find out the ins and outs of Zhujiang Shanghai Commandery. Xueqi didn't want his lord to misunderstand, so when he was in Su Bei's territory, he often asked people to call him by other names. Well, the nickname he gave himself was 5 Flavors. Sour, bitter, sweet, spicy, salty. It was a nickname that had the flavor of a foodie. He didn't like those elegant nicknames that were full of artistic flavor, but he was rather fond of the common name, 5 Flavors. Qin Gong's eyelids twitched. The military advisor is 5 Flavors? For some reason, the nickname that Xueqi usually liked now felt somewhat shameful. Yes. Qin Gong's confidence increased after receiving a positive reply. We'll do as the military advisor says. Xueqi was 5 Flavors. This truth gave him an inexplicable confidence and made him feel much more at ease. It was unrealistic to shorten the journey by 6 days, but it was still possible to shorten the journey by 2 to 3 days if they worked hard. Not only did it ensure speed, but it also ensured the combat strength of the soldiers. Shanwu City was on the brink of destruction. The enemy outside the city launched continuous attacks day and night, and the soldiers under Su Fei's tent could only struggle to cope. As the days passed, the originally sturdy city walls became mottled, and obvious signs of damage appeared on the walls. Regardless of whether it was the attacker or the defender, they would have to pay a terrible price for every attack. When the gongs were sounded to retreat, both sides would leave behind many corpses of their soldiers. The air was filled with the stench of blood for several days. Su Fei counted the days with his fingers. His heart was tormented, and his already dry hair was dyed gray in just a few days. The reinforcements haven't arrived yet? He had to ask this question every day, sometimes more than 10 times. Every time, he received an answer that disappointed him. They haven't arrived. Su Fei's nerves were stretched taut, and his emotions were getting out of control. Because he was tired of defending, he didn't notice that Su Bei's army's attacks had eased up in recent days. This easing was only relative. Shanwu City's defeat was already a foregone conclusion. The only difference was whether it was earlier or later. Unbeknownst to him, Su Bei's side was panicking because of the rumors that Xueqi had spread. He couldn't make up his mind for a while. The secret envoy has sent back news that Lu Shi's army used 10,000 vanguard soldiers as bait. They secretly split into 3 groups and launched a sneak attack on Xueqi County. If this news is true, why don't our lord temporarily postpone the attack and return to help stabilize Xueqi County? Su Fei is already an arrow at the end of its flight. It's not worth the risk. There were many such voices, but there were also different voices. Cheng Sun said, "The secret envoy's news can't be completely trusted." These few days, there weren't any traces of Lu Shi splitting his army to launch a sneak attack, his colleague refuted. Since it's a sneak attack, how can it be easily discovered by the scouts? What is a surprise attack? The important thing is to catch the enemy off guard and attack when they are unprepared. Cheng Sun frowned, his eyes filled with disgust. He retorted, "Since it's a surprise attack, how did the secret envoy receive this news?" If the secret envoy could receive this news, there was no reason that the scouts at the front would not have discovered traces of the army. His colleague choked on his words. Compared to Cheng Sun's radicalism, the others in the tent were more conservative. They didn't seek to be meritorious, but to avoid mistakes. There was nothing wrong with being more cautious. The scouts' movements were more obvious. They were a big target and it was easy for the enemy to avoid them. The secret envoy would disguise himself as a commoner and blend into various places. It would be difficult for the enemy to detect him. The 2 sources of information were different, but they couldn't deny that the enemy did not split their army. After arguing for what was right, Cheng Sun and his colleagues could only take a step back and choose a more conservative plan. Mobilize some of the troops to reinforce Shanwu City and continue attacking. All of this fell into Yang Xi's calculations. Until Han Yu finished his work in Zhe County and hurriedly rushed to the front line in Shanghai County. Halfway there, he realized that his own army had retreated and turned pale with fright. Su Bei's army crushed Su Fei. How could he be attacked? Han Yu was so angry that his hair was about to stand on end. Who asked Su Bei to attack Su Fei? He really wanted to attack Su Fei. Not only did he work so hard for Lu Shi, he even helped Lu Shi get rid of a hidden danger. So be it. Who asked Su Bei to withdraw some of his troops to reinforce Zhe County? The three armies sounded intimidating, but if they wanted to launch a sneak attack without anyone knowing, each army would at most have 2,000 to 3,000 men. The three armies added up to less than 10,000 men. How could they penetrate the vast Zhe County? It sounded like Yang Xi's smokescreen. Chapter 11-19. The reinforcements haven't arrived yet? Su Fei's eyes were bloodshot. Due to the lack of sleep for a long time, his eyes were dark and swollen. He looked especially haggard. When he repeated this question, the leader of the guards beside him replied in despair, "They haven't arrived. My lord, please give up. A round trip from Mountain Urn City to Wanzhou will take more than 2 months. Even if Colonel Qin is a fine steed, he won't make it in time." Su Fei's face turned ashen, and a dispirited aura encircled him. "You can leave, I want some time alone." Su Fei seemed to have been drained of all his energy. He slumped onto the mat, his eyes staring ahead listlessly. If the enemy wasn't Su Bei, he might not have been able to hold on. The position of the Su family head had always been given to the most capable. Su Bei was only born a few days earlier and was lucky enough to have the title of the eldest legitimate grandson. Apart from that, he was nothing. If Su Bei hadn't used dirty tricks, how could he have become the head of the family? Su Fei had always been brooding over this. In this lifetime, he, Su Fei, could lose to anyone but Su Bei. Seeing Su Fei's state, the leader of the guards was anxious, but he didn't dare to anger him further. The sky gradually darkened, and the battle cries outside Mountain Urn City gradually subsided. Watching the orange sunset gradually sink from the west, Su Fei's taut nerves temporarily relaxed. However, he knew that after this night, an even more intense attack would come tomorrow. There weren't many weapons left in the city. "What's the situation outside the city?" Su Fei asked. "The number of casualties has increased by 500. There are only 5,000 soldiers left in the city. If we attack again tomorrow, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold the city gates." The old general guarding the city gates said tiredly, "At noon today, the enemy's vanguard broke through the city gates. Hundreds of them charged into the city. If not for the soldiers blocking the gates with spears, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to hold them. The situation tomorrow will be even worse. We won't be able to hold Mountain Urn City." Mountain Urn City was lacking in resources, and the soldiers had suffered heavy casualties. It looked like they were at the end of their rope. The old general said hoarsely, "My lord, why don't we?" Su Fei stared straight at him, his thin lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't say a word. The old general knew that Su Fei was unhappy, but it was too late to say some things now. He said earnestly, "Where there's life there's hope. My lord is so noble, why do you want to perish together with the rubble? Listen to this old official's words. You should disguise yourself and let the guards escort you and the mistress out of Mountain Urn City." If the old general stayed behind to delay them and attract the majority of the troops, there might still be a chance of survival. If we continue to stay in Shanwu City, sooner or later we will become a turtle in their jar. The old general was straightforward and didn't notice that his choice of words was inappropriate. How could Su Fei be a turtle? Su Fei's fists loosened and tightened, then tightened and loosened again. His expression kept changing, just like the torment and hesitation in his heart. The old general advised, "Your Highness, make a decision as soon as possible." Su Fei took a deep breath and closed his eyes to hide the pain surging in them. "All right," he agreed. Abandoning the Barbican city to escape would mean admitting that he was inferior to Su Bei. How could Su Fei be willing to accept this? The old general heaved a sigh of relief. He got up with difficulty and bowed to Su Fei, then slowly bowed and retreated. The old man was getting on in years. Regardless of physical strength or combat ability, he couldn't compare to a young man. Seeing his old companions die in battle one by one, the old general felt extremely pained. However, he couldn't show it and affect the morale of the army. The night was dark and the enemy didn't come to ambush them. However, no one dared to let their guard down. They were afraid that if they slept, they wouldn't wake up again. The old general personally went to the city gates to check on the defense. He didn't expect to be able to defend the city tomorrow. He just hoped to delay for a while longer to buy time for his lord. That night, the Su residence in Shanwu City was brightly lit. Su Fei's wife dismissed most of the maids and servants. The women were extremely busy. Not only did they have to pack up gold and silver, but they also had to prepare rations, water, and carriages. As the mistress of the house, the first wife could still hold the fort. However, the women in the courtyard were crying and wailing. Their emotions affected their children. A few sons and daughters of concubines were crying in the arms of their nannies or birth mothers, tears dripping down their cheeks. The eldest daughter, who was now 11 years old, was the calmest. Not only did she not cry, she even helped her mother pack up. Bringing jewelry at a time like this? The first wife saw the concubines packed up one by one. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. His most favored concubine had 5 chests of clothes and jewelry. Now, she didn't even care about her life, but still cared about beauty. At a critical moment, could these jewelry become food and water? When they were hungry or thirsty, did they rely on gold and silver jewelry to survive? The concubine who was reprimanded blushed and immediately tried to defend herself. Why can't I bring it? These are all gifts from Master. If I lose any one of them and Master asks, I won't be able to bear the responsibility. This noble concubine was the one with the most confidence in the residence because her belly was very strong. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. 2 of the sons of concubines were born from her belly. The first wife and Su Fei had been married for many years. Until now, they only had 1 daughter. For the sake of her children, the first wife could only turn a blind eye to the concubine's jealousy. Mother, don't worry about her. If she likes to wear it, then let her wear it. Daughter wants to see if father will let her get on the carriage. The first wife was about to get angry when her right hand was gently held by her daughter. A concubine is a concubine, something that can't be shown in public. They were running for their lives, not on a spring outing. The concubine choked and her pretty face turned red with anger. She knew that this eldest daughter had a fiery temperament, but she didn't expect her to be so vulgar. She dared to scold her in front of her Shu mother? I am your Shu mother. How dare you insult me like this? A Shu mother is also a mother. But are you worthy? The concubine was about to get angry when she saw Su Fei's figure. At this time, she swallowed back her words. She pinched the handkerchief and pressed it against her watery eyes, as if she had been greatly wronged. If Su Fei saw her like this, she would most likely come over and ask a few questions. She could then accuse her. The result was unexpected. Su Fei went straight inside. She passed by a few beautiful concubines and asked the first wife, "Everything is ready?" The first wife replied, "Everything is ready." Su Fei sighed softly. "Then let's go." The concubine's sons and daughters were also perceptive. They were crying hoarsely just now, but when Su Fei came, they became sobs. Su Fei led the way and was about to leave. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the big chests. An inexplicable anger filled his chest. "Is this what you mean by everything is ready?" The first wife glanced at them and secretly curled her lips. "These chests are not mine. Even my paternal family only picked 2 as souvenirs." Su Fei's eyes suddenly turned. The concubine who was originally planning how to accuse her was shocked. She had served Su Fei for many years. When had she ever seen such a scary look? It was as if a beast would jump out in the next second and bite off her neck. These are concubines. They are all gifts from Master. I can't bear to part with any of them." Su Fei looked at her a few times and suddenly snorted coldly. The concubine thought she was safe and showed a charming smile again. Chapter 11:20. She bent over in pain, and the smile on her face froze. Su Fei exerted a little force, and the tip of the sword slid out of her body. Blood stained the ground, splashed on the boxes, stained her dress, and stung the eyes of the onlookers. Su Fei said coldly, Let's go. A woman who did not understand the situation would only be a burden. Since she could not bear to part with these things, then let her bring them to the Yellow Springs. Xueqi was not a broad-minded person. He did not plan to take this concubine away, but she would be humiliated in the city, and sooner or later she would die. It was better to die now, and leave everything clean. Whoever is reluctant to part with her can also stay behind to accompany her. Once he said this, how would those women dare to court death? Witnessing their mother being killed, the two bastards cried out in fear, and one by one asked for their mother. They cried with all their might, and the ear-piercing sound pierced everyone's eardrums. Usually, Xueqi would have comforted them, but now he looked at them coldly, and his brows furrowed impatiently. To prevent Xueqi from losing control of his emotions and doing something shocking, the main wife spoke up in time. "Master, it's getting late." After Xueqi heard this, he walked out of the hall with a gloomy face. There were 5 plain carriages outside the residence. 4 were used to carry people, and 1 was used to carry rice, dry food, and luggage. Xueqi did not have many wives and concubines, but they were not few either. Just the children alone could take up a carriage. When everything was ready, the sky was still dark, like the ink in the inkstone that could not be melted. Everyone squeezed into the narrow carriage, and everyone's expression was not good. Before he could sit down, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps coming from outside, followed by a breathless report. "Report, the enemy has launched a sneak attack. One of the city gates has been captured. Please leave quickly, my lord." Xueqi's face turned pale, and the women panicked, tears welling up in their eyes. The children cried loudly, and their cries made people's heads hurt. Xueqi's eldest daughter nestled in her mother's arms, stubbornly pursing her lips, and her bright eyes were filled with panic. The main wife felt her daughter trembling, and comforted her gently. "Don't worry. Mother is here." Although she said that, her palms were sweating and her heart was beating like a drum. In a sense, women in troubled times were inferior to livestock. The first wife didn't dare to think about it. If it was necessary, would Xueqi abandon them? Probably, right? She thought blankly. The wheels of the cart rolled forward. The sky outside was still pitch black, just like everyone's situation at the moment. There was no hope at all. The battle cries were left behind by the carriage. Only the sound of rolling wheels and clashing armor could be heard. Xueqi's eldest daughter plucked up her courage and lifted the curtain. She saw that the horizon behind the carriage was dotted with orange dots, as if the sun was rising from the east. Taking a closer look, it wasn't the sun at all. It was clearly a fiery light that soared into the sky. Tongues of fire were wreaking havoc in Mountain Urn City, turning the familiar scenery into ashes. "Mother!" Her mouth and tongue were dry, and her beating heart seemed to be out of her control, making her feel an inexplicable fear and panic. Under the protection of the guards, the caravan safely left the city. Xueqi didn't feel lucky because danger was everywhere. The enemy could catch up at any time. The soldier who was searching for Xueqi's whereabouts reported, "My lord, we've searched everywhere. He's not here." Xueqi asked, "He escaped?" At this moment someone under the tent said, "My lord, I don't think he's gone far. If we go after him now, we can still catch up." Xueqi's heart wavered. Regarding this decision, he was against it. It was true that he wanted to defeat Xueqi, but he didn't hate him to the point where he had to take his life. If he were to catch him now, how to deal with him would become a problem. No matter how fiercely he and Xueqi fought, they were still cousins. Rounding it up, they were blood brothers. An elder brother killing a younger brother, how could it be heard? Without waiting for Xueqi to finish hesitating, someone added, "My lord, letting a tiger return to the mountains will cause endless trouble in the future. Please reconsider." Letting a tiger return to the mountains? That's right. If he let Xueqi go, the other party wouldn't appreciate it. Xueqi became hot-headed and ordered, "Send people to chase after him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." By the time he realized what he had said, it was already too late to retract his words. It wasn't that the officials wanted Xueqi dead, but they thought themselves clever and thought that this was Xueqi's true intentions. The Barbican city was destroyed, and the commoners in the city were in a state of panic. They packed their belongings and prepared to flee the chaos of war with their families. In an instant, the situation became even more chaotic. The water was murky, and naturally, there were many people who tried to fish in troubled waters. How did these people fish in troubled waters? The more despicable ones would steal money and hide it. The more despicable ones would kidnap women to be used as reserve soldiers in the brothel. They might even drag people to a deserted place and rape them. The most despicable ones would directly slaughter innocent commoners and use their heads as military contributions. Of course, the ones who did these things might not necessarily be real soldiers. Soldiers were also divided into different ranks. Most of the people who did these things were water soldiers. However, they were tarnishing the reputation of the entire military camp. During war, the various feudal vassals loved to brag about their military strength and brainlessly add water. Between a 400,000-strong army and a 1,000,000-strong army, of course the latter sounded more impressive. Let's take a chestnut. If a feudal vassal had a 1,000,000-strong army, excluding the amount of bragging, there would only be 400,000 survivors. This didn't mean that the military strength of the feudal vassals' camp was really 400,000. There might only be 100,000 soldiers who could really be considered as soldiers in the feudal vassals' camp. These people had military status, enjoyed military benefits, and were promoted and had their salaries raised when they performed military functions. The military expenses of the feudal vassal were all used on them. Weapons and armor were also provided to them first. Excluding these 100,000 people, what were the remaining 300,000? The rest were water soldiers. This was the same principle as pouring water into pork. The water that was poured into the pork could not be eaten as meat, but it could increase the overall weight of the pork. These water soldiers were randomly recruited to act as human heads. There were many of them, but they didn't have much combat power. There were all sorts of people from all walks of life. Many of them couldn't live any longer and sneaked in to eat. If the wind was favorable, they would charge forward. If the wind was against them, they would turn around and flee. For these people, the military camp's discipline couldn't restrain them at all. Under the influence of war, their hostility was also the heaviest. It was extremely easy for them to do evil in an atmosphere of indulgence. In the chaos of war, they did some bad things to fill their pockets. Who would tell on them? What's more, they ran away after making a profit. Who would go to war to catch them? Because of the existence of these people, the people of Shanwu City were anxious and wanted to escape. Not escape? Stay where they were and wait for death? My lord, the pursuers have caught up. Because they couldn't find the whereabouts of Xueqi and the others, they could only cast a wide net and send out several teams to search for them. This also caused the number of enemies who found traces of Xueqi and the others to be small. If they fought hard, they could still kill their way out. After a fierce battle, the 5 carriages were scattered by the chaotic army. When Xueqi heard this news, his entire face turned green. My lord, most of the guards were by Xueqi's side, so they could still fight. Turn back. Chapter 11:21. My lord, please think of the bigger picture. The guard was loyal to Xueqi. Of course, he prioritized Xueqi's interests and safety. In many people's eyes, it was fine if their wives and children died. After all, they could still remarry and have more children. This was what it meant when there was life, there was hope. The guard did not want to give up on the mistress and young master, but they could not let Xueqi take the risk. What bigger picture? Xueqi's breathing was heavy. His eyes were bloodshot, as if they were about to burst out of his eye sockets. The road ahead is bleak, and there are pursuers behind us. This is a situation where we will definitely die. Death is not scary. I cannot let Xueqi see me as a joke. Xueqi's ambition was not as great as the outside world thought. On the contrary, his ambition was rather simple. He could be the head of the Xu family and enjoy life without having to do anything. The most important point was, Xueqi had to be more destitute than him. When the two of them competed in power, he had already lost. This was enough to make him feel aggrieved. He could not allow his wife and children to fall into Xueqi's hands. That would make him laugh at himself. Laugh at what? For a man to abandon his wife and children in order to live, wasn't that embarrassing? After all, Xueqi was born into a landowning household. It was true that he cherished his life, but he also cherished his reputation. He was not a shameless person. The guard could not dissuade Xueqi. He sighed and could only regroup before turning around to search. However, they were all separated. How could it be easy to find them? Before Xueqi could find them, the next wave of pursuers met him head-on. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. They did not waste words but fought. To the pursuers, Xueqi was not only the enemy's lord, but he was also a mobile warrior. The price of his head was very high. Xueqi fought and retreated. It was not easy for him to break out of the encirclement and shake off this wave of pursuers. During this period of delay, the pursuers caught up one after another. He had no time to find them. He could not even figure out the direction and could only run for his life. In the end, he was forced into a desolate village with only 10 families. The guards by his side were also reduced to 2. The 3 of them could only hide in the courtyard of a farmer's house. This farmer's house was considered wealthy in the village. The courtyard was built with stone walls and covered with yellow mud, unlike the other farmers who only had fences. When the villagers heard that there was a war, they fled early. Xueqi's injuries were the lightest. He had only been cut twice. The guards who had risked their lives to protect him were more heavily injured. Half of their bodies were covered in blood. A man entered the farmhouse. After a while, he found a set of men's clothes. He held the clothes with both hands and said, "My lord, please change into this." "I will change into your clothes to distract the pursuers. You should take advantage of the situation and blend into the ranks of the refugees. You might still have a chance of survival." Seeing this, Xueqi's eyes were filled with sorrow. He said, "Forget it, you may leave, master." The 2 of them couldn't believe their ears. What did he mean by letting them go? Their pursuers were still rushing over, and they did not know when they would catch up with them. If another wave came, none of them would survive. "I've made up my mind." Xueqi panted and said with a calm expression, "There's no way forward and no way back. If the heavens want me dead, how can I defy the heavens? I was born into the Xu family. I was born noble. I have my own pride. If I have to pretend to be a refugee in order to survive and linger on for the rest of my life, I might as well face death. At least he would be able to clear his name. I want to let Xueqi know that I will not lose to him in this aspect." Xueqi gritted his teeth and squeezed out a few words. "I will wait for him at the Yellow Springs Road." Xueqi had tried to kill him. He wanted to see what kind of good ending this person would have. The 2 guards looked at each other and saw the hot tears welling up in each other's eyes. Feeling helpless, they bowed to Xueqi and left the courtyard. Before leaving, they even closed the courtyard door. Xueqi looked at the green tree in the courtyard. The corners of his lips curled into a helpless sneer. What a coincidence. The place to hang himself was already prepared. Xueqi moved a wooden stool over and untied the decorative silk sash around his waist. He wrapped it twice and hung it on a tree branch with a dead knot. Facing death required a great deal of courage, but Xueqi felt at peace. He stretched his neck over and kicked the stool. There were 2 sides to the conversation. Xueqi's wives and concubines had been separated from him. It was unknown whether it was due to the guidance of the unseen or something else, but the carriages of his wives and sons were not far from each other. They quickly gathered together. What caused them to despair was that Xueqi's carriage had disappeared. Most of the guards had also disappeared. Although they had dozens of guards by their side, they were not enough to protect them. The concubines felt that Xueqi had abandoned them and wept non-stop. The main wife made a decision and hurried along the planned route while looking for Xueqi. How would the concubines dare to talk back? The dozens of guards who were left behind only listened to their lord and mistress. They were just concubines. Who did they think they were? If they talked back, they might die even faster. Unfortunately, their luck was just that little bit off. After they separated from Xueqi, they attracted the covetous eyes of bandits. These bandits were ruffians who had become bandits nearby. They were originally the water soldiers of Mountain Urn City. Ever since Mountain Urn City fell into a bitter battle and was about to fall, the water soldiers fled more and more in order to survive. They escaped, but food became a problem. They had no money and no rations. They could only take the risk out of desperation and rob houses. Needless to say, this kind of life was wonderful. Each of them lived a free and unfettered life. It was much more comfortable than being a nuisance soldier. One day, they saw a few carriages from afar. The guards protecting the carriages were all injured. The bandits pondered for a while and quickly guessed that the carriages belonged to a wealthy family who escaped from Mountain Urn City. Any item from such a wealthy family was enough for them to eat for a lifetime. Wouldn't it be a pity if they didn't kill a fat fish that came to their doorstep? The gods were well trained and were armed. However, they were few in number and they were all injured. The bandits were numerous and had all kinds of weapons in their hands. There were choppers, saws, hoes, stones, carrying poles. Everything that one could think of. As the saying goes, a random punch could kill an experienced master. The bandits quickly gained the upper hand and killed all the remaining guards. "Boss! They are all women!" An exclamation was heard from among them. Along with the exclamation, there was also the high-pitched scream of a woman. The faces of the women turned pale. The bandits outside the carriage wanted to poke their heads in, scaring them. Mother****, each of them is prettier than the last. Look, I'm hard. The thing in front of your chest is so big and soft. It's much better than the girls in the brothel. This skin is so thin and soft. It's hard to pinch, right? A group of boorish men commented on them. When had these women who lived in the backyard ever seen such a scene? These men spoke vulgarly. Listening to them, they had a vague feeling that they were being violated from head to toe. They wanted to kill themselves. What good could they get from falling into the hands of these men? "Don't touch my daughter." A man tried to reach out to Xueqi's eldest daughter. The first wife clawed and scratched him like crazy. She opened her mouth and bit his nose. Crazy woman. After being bitten, the man grabbed the first wife's hair and threw her to the side. The back of her head hit the carriage. With a thud, the whole carriage shook. "Xueqi, run. Little girl, where can you run to?" How could a young girl who lived in the boudoir be a match for an adult man? She was grabbed by the hair and slapped. The force was so strong that half of her face quickly swelled up. The man still refused to stop and lifted her up from the ground. Chapter 11:22. Looking at the carriages filled with beautiful women, the thugs were drooling. They couldn't wait to do it out in the open. They didn't even have a basic sense of shame. Normally, they didn't need to go to the toilet. They just needed to loosen their belts and take out something to pee. Doing the pleasurable things between men and women, using the sky as their blanket and the ground as their bed, was a different kind of excitement. However, they couldn't do it now. "Stop, stop. Look at how impatient you guys are. It's as if you haven't slept with a woman in 800 years. The leader of the thugs said, "Let's find a place to enjoy ourselves." As he spoke, several men had already pounced on one of the concubines and were tearing her clothes to shreds. "What are you stopping for?" "I'm suffocating," the leader of the thugs said. "Mountain Urn City can't hold on any longer. If you guys want to be killed halfway, go ahead." They were all water soldiers and were well aware of the unspoken rules of this trade. In order to gain merit and climb up the ranks, many people used the heads of commoners to make up the numbers. The waters of this trade were deep. If they met the water soldiers of Xueqi's army, they wouldn't be merciful. As he said this, the fire burning in their bellies lessened. One by one, they cursed their bad luck. "Let's go back first. We'll have fun when we get back." The leader of the thugs laughed and tossed the spoils of war back into the carriage. Mother Xueqi. The wife of the first wife disregarded her own sorry state and crawled to her daughter's side. She hugged her in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Su Yanxiao hugged her back and cried in her wife's arms. "Mother, my head hurts." She stubbornly refused to make a sound. She only bit her lips until the taste of blood entered her teeth. Her scalp was in so much pain that it was almost numb. She even felt as if a piece of her scalp had been forcefully torn open. The wife of the first wife raised her hand and gently caressed her scalp. Mother and daughter cried like two tearful people. Her husband's whereabouts were unknown and she couldn't even protect herself. She couldn't even protect her daughter. In just half a day, she had tasted pain that she had never experienced in the first half of her life. The wheels of the carriage were still moving forward. Listening to the discussion of the thugs outside, the wife of the first wife's heart gradually sank into an icy abyss. Only the main wife and Su Yanxiao were in this carriage. The concubines were in other carriages. Hearing the faint cries and screams coming from outside, the main wife's tongue felt bitter and she didn't know what to say. Xueqi liked women with good color. She looked ordinary, so naturally, she was not favored. It was only because of her good family background that she could become his legal wife. Concubines were different. After all, they were playthings that men used to enjoy. They were beautiful. Because of this, Xueqi's concubines were all as beautiful as flowers and jade, and when they gathered together, they were pleasing to the eye. In contrast to them, the already ordinary main wife was even more unlikable. These past few years, she had been busy with Xueqi's women in the inner courtyard and had expended too much energy. Today, in order to escape for her life, she did not have time to put on makeup and looked 5 or 6 years older than her actual age. If it weren't for those beautiful concubines, she wouldn't have been able to escape. Don't listen. She raised her hand to cover her daughter's ears, and the tears that had stopped rolling down her cheeks again. The carriage went further and further away, and in the distance, they saw a small village with more than 10 families on the horizon. The official wife's heart sank. She pursed her lips tightly, and her expression was emotionless. "We're here!" someone shouted, and the wheels of the carriage slowed down. A few thugs were impatient and directly carried the 2 naked concubines on their shoulders. The loose hair on her temples scattered, making her skin whiter and her black hair darker. Her white flesh was exposed to everyone's eyes. The more the woman struggled, the more parts that could be seen. The thugs' mouths were dry, and their throats kept moving. "Mother! I can't wait!" The leader of the thugs snorted in disdain. What's so good about a few women that have been played with? The one that he liked was a fledgling. "Let go of my daughter, Xiao." The leader wanted to touch Xiao, but how could the official wife agree? This old shrew. The leader of the thugs kicked the official wife's shoulder and smiled at the other brothers who didn't get a woman. "Although this woman is old, it's still good to cover her head." Xiao struggled, opened her mouth and bit his ear, then was slapped by him. Both sides of her face were swollen red. This slap used all of his strength, making Xiao's head feel dizzy, as if all the sounds around her were moving away. "Ah! What are you shouting about? There's someone hanging here." Opening the door, a man's corpse hanging from a tree was facing them. This person was wearing a luxurious robe, his clothes were stained with someone's blood, his face was dark green, his tongue was sticking out, and his eyes were almost popping out. Someone hanged themselves here? Everyone was startled. The official wife took this opportunity to struggle free. Her eyes were looking at the man's corpse hanging from the tree. With just one look, she knew who this person was. For a moment, a strong sense of grief rose from her chest to her brain. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she broke away from the 2 thugs and hit the wall of the farmhouse. She used a lot of strength, the entire wall shook, and blood spurted out from her forehead. "Mother!" Xiao screamed. The leader of the thugs spat at the female corpse on the ground. "You're really unlucky." Xiao was very agitated, using both her hands and feet, trying to attack the thug leader. Although it wasn't fatal, it was still very painful. The thug leader was furious and threw her to the ground. "I'll give this girl to you. If you can't play with her mother, you can play with her as your daughter." Xiao didn't listen to him. She cried and crawled to the official wife's corpse, sobbing, "Mother, look at Xiao." The thugs didn't have sympathy. For them, personal needs were more important than anything else. "This girl is quite fierce." The thugs laughed and teased her, grabbing her shoulders and lifting her up. "Let me go! Get out, let me go!" At this moment, the gravel on the ground trembled. A low rumbling sound came from afar, getting louder and louder. "What's going on?" The thugs were so shocked that they stopped. "This is the sound of horse hooves." The thugs who stayed outside the village rushed in, shouting as they ran. "Not good, there are a lot of people outside." The thug leader roared. "Who are they? Are they here for these women?" Xiao clenched her teeth, took the opportunity to push them away, and jumped to the side. She crawled to her mother's corpse with her hands and feet, hugging the body that was still warm. "Run!" The thug leader looked at the women around him, unwilling to give up. Women were good, but they needed to be alive to enjoy it. Then these women. There were always people who liked to think with their lower body. "If you want to stay, then stay. Don't get in my way." As they spoke, the sound of horse hooves was getting closer. Those with good eyesight could see the color of the horse that the person in front was riding. Xiao's eyes flashed a hint of fierceness. While the thugs were panicking and trying to escape, She rushed over and hugged the legs of the leader. The man was caught off guard and lost his balance, causing him to tumble down. If I can't live, you have to die too. Whether they were friend or foe, she couldn't let them escape. Stay and be buried with them. The thug leader quickly reacted, using some strength to break free from Su Yanxiao, and kicked her to the side. Su Yanxiao was a stubborn person, so she endured the pain and climbed up, trying to stop him again. Madman. At this moment, an arrow pierced through the air. The sharp arrow pierced through his brain, causing his body to fall in the opposite direction. General Qin Gong, I'm late to save you. Su Yanxiao's eyes were wide open. Hot tears filled her eyes. Chapter 11:23. Perhaps it was the guidance of fate. Su Fei let the two guards leave, which gave Su Yanxiao and the others a chance to live. The two guards knew that Su Fei had made up his mind to die. The two men cried their eyes out, but in order to leave Su Fei with the last shred of dignity, they chose to leave. If they met any pursuers, they could lead them away to prevent their lord's corpse from falling into the hands of the enemy. Both of them were seriously injured, so they could only support each other as they moved forward. After about 2 hours, they could faintly hear the sound of horse hooves. They had not found any traces of the enemy, but the enemy had already found them. The two of them were ready for battle. The scouts who found them did not attack immediately, but maintained a certain distance and shouted from afar. Who's there? Report quickly. The scouts on horseback looked rough, and their attire was unfamiliar. They spoke with a northern accent, and did not look like they were from Xueqi County or Hu County. The gods were bewildered and asked hesitantly, Who are you? The scouts looked at each other, exchanged information in a low voice, and made a unanimous decision. While the two of them were unprepared, they threw out the noose. The two of them were seriously injured, and the weapons in their hands were chipped. One look and it was obvious that they had experienced a fierce battle not long ago. Apart from that, they were also wearing finely made armor, which was even more suspicious. A full set of armor, other than the real elite battalion, could only be worn by soldiers above the centurion level. Those below the centurion level could at most wear a breastplate or a piece of leather to protect their vital parts. The water soldiers were even more casual. They wore their own coarse hemp clothes and held sharpened wooden sticks. That was it. As Su Fei's personal guards, the two of them were naturally treated well, and could afford to wear a full set of armor. After being tied up and brought back by the scouts, the two guards were ready to curse, and were shocked to find that there was a familiar face here. Qin, young General Qin? Wasn't this armored, helmet-wearing youth frowning on a horse Qin Gong? Qin Gong also noticed the style of their armor, and quickly got off the horse. He said to the scout, Quickly let them go. The scout did as he was told, and loosened the noose. The two guards stared blankly at Qin Gong, and then at the large wave of people he had brought with him, a sour feeling spreading through them. It was too late. If it had been half a day earlier, no. If it had been 4 hours earlier, the Lord wouldn't have been driven into a corner and had no choice but to hang herself. Yang Si led the gentle purplish-red horse forward and asked Qin Gong, breaking the strange atmosphere between the three of them. Lieutenant Qin, these two are. Qin Gong came back to his senses and briefly said, These two are the guards of your father. Su Fei's name was Ling Wen, which meant that he was talented in writing. With Qin Gong's current position, he could not address Su Fei as his lord, so he could only change to another form of respect. The two guards noticed that the way Qin Gong addressed Su Fei had changed, but they did not dare to mention it in this situation. Although Qin Gong tried his best to restrain himself, he still asked impatiently, Do you know where Ling Wen Gong is now? The guard's eyes were red, and he couldn't hold back the pain that had accumulated in his heart. He actually burst into tears. As she wept, she said, My lord has been waiting for you for a long time. Su Bei's army has attacked the mountain urn city by force. The lord had no choice but to break out of the encirclement. Halfway through, she met with pursuers. My lord, mistress, and the others split up. My lord refused to give up on his wife and daughter. He brought people to search for them, but the number of pursuers increased. In the end, his troops were exhausted. With no way out, my lord could only hang himself in despair. As the guard wept, Qin Gong already had a bad premonition. When he finished, Qin Gong felt even more dizzy. His dry throat seemed to have a strange feeling. He struggled to find a trace of clarity, and his eyes quickly became red and watery. Qin Gong grabbed the guard's shoulder, his fingers trembling as he asked in a hoarse voice, "Where is my lord's body now?" In a moment of desperation, he had forgotten that Yangtze was standing beside him. The guard replied, "Your subordinates still remember the location. We can bring young General Qin there." Good. Qin Gong suppressed his violent emotions. His right hand gripped his weapon tightly, his knuckles turning from white to green from the force. He mounted the horse and was about to give the order when he suddenly remembered something. "Advisor Yang, this general has a presumptuous request." Yangtze smiled. "Lieutenant Qin, please speak. Your father had 3 sons and 3 daughters, but now they have been separated due to the chaos." Qin Gong was now going to fetch Su Fei's body. If he was late, Su Fei's head might have already been cut off by the soldiers under Su Pei's tent, and he would die without a complete corpse. Qin Gong missed his lord, but he was also concerned about the safety of his old master's family. He could only entrust Yangtze to help find them. He knew that his request would arouse Yangtze's disgust, and even make his new master wary and suspicious of him, but he couldn't care so much. Yangtze said righteously, "Lieutenant Qin, go ahead. I will bring people to find your father's family." Qin Gong nodded heavily and led 2,000 soldiers to find the farmer's village that the guard had mentioned. He didn't dare to stop for even a moment. After galloping for nearly a quarter of an hour, he finally saw the village. From afar, he discovered that this village wasn't uninhabited like the guard had said. There were people who looked like they were on the lookout outside the village. Of course, he didn't doubt the guard's words. He was just worried that these people would harm Su Fei's body. When he got closer, he could faintly see more than 20 thugs. With his excellent eyesight, he even saw the figures of a few women. After thinking for a bit, Qin Gong guessed that these thugs were beasts who took advantage of the chaos to bully and humiliate the people. Those thugs also discovered traces of Qin Gong and the others. They seemed to be making use of this time to escape. Qin Gong snorted coldly. He knocked his bow and shot an arrow, aiming at the head of the thug who was entangled by the young girl. One arrow was shot, and it killed in one shot. In a short period of time, the horse galloped for a distance. It was enough for Qin Gong to clearly see the face of the young girl who dared to fight against the thugs. Both sides of her face were bruised and swollen. Her hair had long been disheveled and scattered over her shoulders. However, her facial features, Qin Gong was shocked. It was as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water from head to toe on the coldest day of the year. His brain and limbs were frozen. Without waiting for the horse to stop, he dismounted and knelt on one knee. "I am Qin Gong. I came late to save you." Su Yanxiao shrunk back, then crawled a few steps in a sorry state. She grabbed onto Qin Gong's arms tightly. However, she could only grab onto the ice-cold scales. Just like her current state of mind, it was so cold that she couldn't feel any warmth. "Qin Fengjing. Why did you only come now?" she cried uncontrollably. Her tears flowed down uncontrollably. In an instant, half of her face was wet. "Why did you only come now?" Qin Gong didn't dare to move. He tried to say something, but when he saw Su Yanxiao's appearance, his throat choked and he couldn't say a word. If it was possible, he also wanted to come 4 hours earlier. His lord didn't have to hang herself, and the person in front of him didn't have to suffer such grievances. Chapter 11:24. Su Yanxiao could still whimper at first, but she suppressed her voice. After a while, she cried uncontrollably until her voice was hoarse. She looked battered and exhausted. She no longer had the demeanor of a noble lady. Anyone could feel her despair and pain from her cries, but Qin Gong could not even give her basic comfort. Qin Gong spurred his horse forward, but the troops following behind him soon arrived. Cheng Yuan got off the horse, panting. He glanced at the scene from afar and took out a cloak from the box on the horse's back. "Colonel Qin." Cheng Yuan handed the cloak to him. Qin Gong came back to his senses and looked up at Cheng Yuan. "Inspector Cheng?" He took the cloak in a daze. He glanced at Su Yanxiao and pursed his thin lips. It was not his fault that he was late, but to Qin Gong, it was his fault for not being able to protect his old master's family. He did not dare to get close to Su Yanxiao, afraid that he would hurt her. Qin Gong spread the cloak with both hands and covered the body of the first wife. Most of her clothes were made of precious silk. The fabric was comfortable and beautiful, but it could not withstand strong tearing. The thugs were anxious to tear, so how could they take off someone's clothes peacefully? After some pushing and shoving, the clothes on the first wife were almost torn to shreds. Although she had not been physically humiliated before her death, her appearance alone would cause misunderstandings. The first wife was from a noble family and had always paid attention to her personal and family reputation. Qin Gong thought that perhaps First Madam didn't want others to point fingers at her corpse when she was in the netherworld. Cheng Yuan entered the farmyard and found a few panicked women in rags. There was also a male corpse hanging from a tree in the yard. This male corpse was Su Fei of the Su family, Qin Gong's old master. Go and put him down. Cheng Yuan was not naive, but he had never seen such a bloody scene. Su Fei's face was ashen, and his tongue stuck out from his mouth. Cheng Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He turned his face away and ordered the soldiers to carry the corpse down from the tree and put it down properly. They then covered it with a white cloth to preserve its dignity. Lieutenant Qin, we found a male corpse hanging inside. Qin Gong looked at the male corpse being carried out by the soldiers and hesitated for a while. Finally, he stepped forward and slightly lifted a corner of the white cloth. With just one glance, his eyes turned red, and the hostility that had just subsided rose again. Su Bei. Qin Gong's eyes were red as he gritted his teeth and squeezed out these two words. Cheng Yuan sighed softly, patted Qin Gong's shoulder, and comforted him. Colonel Qin, my condolences. Ling Wengong's funeral still needs you to take care of, and the wives and concubines he left behind also need someone to take care of them. Now was not the time to wallow in hatred. The dead were gone, and the living were still here. If Ling Wengong knew about this in the afterlife, he would definitely hope that they would be treated well for the rest of their lives. Most of Ling Wengong's old subordinates had already died in battle. Now, only Colonel Qin was left to shoulder this heavy responsibility. If you lose your mind because of hatred, who will take care of these old and weak women and children? Cheng Yuan's words were reasonable. Qin Gong could only endure the pain. The army supervisor was right. He couldn't fall yet. At the very least, he had to make arrangements for Duke Wen's family. But before that, Qin Gong glanced in the direction that the thugs had fled and hardened his heart. They had humiliated Ling Wengong's family. This debt must be repaid with blood. Army Supervisor Cheng, Ling Wengong's family has been found, but Military Advisor Yang still doesn't know. Cheng Yuan was considerate. He smiled and said, Colonel Qin, don't worry. I will send someone to send a message to the military advisor. That's good. Thank you, Army Supervisor. Cheng Yuan had a good temperament. It was a blessing for the Commander-in-Chief to meet such an easygoing and considerate military supervisor. As the Commander-in-Chief, Qin Gong naturally wouldn't do something like capture the thugs single-handedly. Fortunately, the thugs hadn't run far. How could a two-legged person outrun a four-legged warhorse? In less than a quarter of an hour, the thugs who had just escaped were tied up by the cavalry scouts and thrown onto the ground like a human pyramid. On the other side, Su Yanshao had cried enough. The thugs have all been captured and are at Lady Su's disposal. Qin Gong didn't accompany Su Yanshao. Instead, he went to arrange his troops and make preparations to deal with a fierce battle that could break out at any time. After doing all this, he finally had time to see Su Yanshao. At this moment, she had already stopped crying, but the tear stains on her face were still very obvious. Her eyes were red and swollen like a goldfish. Qin Gong didn't dare to get too close, and his voice was also several degrees softer. Cheng Yuan looked at the two of them, his hands in his sleeves, and he couldn't help but laugh. In Yang Xi's words, Qin Gong was usually like a little wild wolf, but now he had his tail between his legs and pretended to be a harmless puppy. He carefully retracted his claws and teeth. That pitiful look. Sigh, if he were a girl in the boudoir, he might also be attracted to it. Cheng Yuan was amused by the scene in his mind. Yang Xi said, What are you laughing at? Could it be that you're thinking about some young lady? Cheng Yuan laughed and said, Sir, don't make fun of me. There are jackals and wolves at home, like wolves and tigers. I don't dare to provoke them. He had only gotten married in recent years. His wife was a distant relative of his mother's family. Chung Yuan hadn't seen what she looked like before they got married, and they only started getting along after they got married. Although it was a blind marriage, the two of them got along well after getting married. Now, they could be considered to be in love and the young couple was quite happy. Then why were you laughing like that just now? Chung Yuan said, looking at Lieutenant Qin's matter, I couldn't help but think of an embarrassing incident that my wife caused. What embarrassing incident? My wife bought a wild wolf cub at the market and mistook it for a puppy. She raised it for a while, Chung Yuan said with a smile. At that time, she was busy and didn't go home for half a month. When she went back, she saw that wolf cub sweating profusely. She didn't know how big of a joke she had made. Now that I think about it, military advisor Yang, don't you think that Lieutenant Qin looks like that wolf cub pretending to be a puppy? Yang Si looked at him seriously and said, yes. Both of them had been around Qin Gong's age, so of course they could see Qin Gong's feelings for Su Yanxiao. It was precisely because he cared that he was careful. On the other side, Su Yanxiao looked straight at Qin Gong and asked in a hoarse voice, you can do whatever you want with them? Qin Gong said, yes, even if you want to dismember them or cut them into pieces, I'm willing to hand you the blade. The corners of Su Yanxiao's mouth twitched stiffly. Her eyes were lifeless, and it was unknown where her gaze fell. I want to peel their scalps off their skulls one by one. Are you going to do it too? Qin Gong said. Yes. Although it's a delicate and time-consuming job, it's what they deserve. Su Yanxiao's tears, which she had stopped with great difficulty, gushed out again. What about castrating them? Qin Gong asked. Do you want a blunt knife or something sharper? Su Yanxiao sobbed and buried her face in her knees. She said in a voice so low that it was almost inaudible, I want to watch. Qin Gong was worried that she would see a bloody scene, but he wouldn't refuse her request. Chapter 11:25. Of course, Qin Gong wouldn't let Su Yanxiao do it herself. He couldn't let these thugs disgust her a second time. He let the soldiers do the work. Scalping the dead wasn't a big deal. After all, the body wouldn't move. But scalping a living person and castrating him was very exciting. Coincidentally, the soldier who did it was a butcher before joining the army. He was good at skinning pigs. The thug was scared out of his wits and kept begging for mercy. Seeing that begging for mercy didn't work, he cursed out loud, saying whatever he could. Qin Gong was afraid that the thugs wouldn't listen to him, so he covered their mouths with cloth. The knife-wielding soldier looked at Qin Gong, then looked at the pigs in front of him who were tied up on the pillars to prevent them from moving. He clicked his tongue and gestured where to start with the knife. Do you want to shave your head first? He asked his assistant in a low voice. The assistant thought for a while and frowned in disgust. Just do it. I don't know when was the last time they took a bath. The dandruff and oil on their hair are enough to cook a dish. Okay. Find a straw rope and tie his hair up. It's hard to find a place to wear it. He used the knife to draw a circle along his hairline. A blood-red chain appeared. Scalping people was cruel. Qin Gong let them do it in the farmyard. Other than the soldier and his assistant, only Su Yanxiao and him were left. If you feel disgusted, you can go out first. I'll watch for you. A stern expression flashed across Su Yanxiao's immature face as she hoarsely rejected Qin Gong's good intentions. No need. I want to see it with my own eyes. The thugs passed out in pain, but it was convenient for the soldier to do it. At first, he was a bit rusty. Halfway through, he obviously got the feeling and quickly scalped the thugs. When the bloody scalp and hair were placed on a plate in front of Su Yanxiao, she suddenly broke down and laughed hysterically. The soldier asked Qin Gong with his eyes. The scalp was already scalped. Was there a need to castrate him? Qin Gong hugged Su Yanxiao, who was out of control, and answered with his eyes. Castrate. The soldier's legs turned cold. It was a strange feeling to let a butcher castrate another man. He was experienced in skinning. After all, he was a butcher. But castration was difficult. He was not a professional. Thinking of the thug's evil deeds, the soldier could not feel the slightest sympathy. Both of them were people who were about to die, so there was no need to care about anything else. The soldier endured the disgust, pinched the dirty thing under the thug's body with one hand, and held the big knife used to kill people with the other. He pressed it against the root and cut. The thug, who had passed out from the pain, woke up from the pain again. He screamed and passed out again. Bah! Caught off guard, the soldier was sprayed all over his body. He threw the food onto the plate in disgust. How dare he show this thing to Commandant Qin? The soldier looked at Qin Gong. Qin Gong looked at him and then at the meat on his plate. He couldn't help but feel disgusted. Feed it to the dogs. The soldier could not help feeling sorry for the stray dogs in the village. Such a dirty thing, even a stray dog would find it smelly, right? After removing one thug, there were still 30 or 40 left. Qin Gong wouldn't let Su Yanshao look at them one by one. Every time he saw it, he would be stimulated. Wasn't this person stupid? This general promises you that every one of them will meet the same end. I ask Lady Su to prioritize your own health and not to harm yourself. Su Yanshao was indifferent, so Qin Gong could only bring up her mother. Lady Su will still need to take care of the matriarch's funeral. Can you stand by and watch as she dies? He had learned these words from Cheng Yuan. Although he was suspected of plagiarism, it was fine as long as it worked. To Su Yanshao, the legal wife was her weakness. Qin Gong coaxed Su Yanshao away. The soldier holding the knife looked at him silently, his eyes asking, "Should we continue?" Qin Gong gritted his teeth. "Continue. Kill as many as you can. If you can't make it in time, remember to kill them so that they don't waste their lives." With more than 10,000 soldiers stationed here, they were practically moving landmarks. The soldiers sent by Su Bei weren't blind. They would definitely discover them. If there was a need, they would have to carry out a strategic retreat. Time was tight. The soldier received the order. Yes. Apart from Su Yanshao, Su Fei's concubines had also survived. Each of them was battered and exhausted. Qin Gong didn't have a good impression of them. Moreover, he was a foreign official and had to avoid arousing suspicion. He couldn't get close to his old master's woman. "Commandant Qin, the military advisor has sent this general to inform you that the heirs of Duke Wengong have been found." They had been found, but they weren't alive. Su Fei had 3 sons and 3 daughters. The eldest son was already 9 years old, while the younger one hadn't stopped breastfeeding. In the carriage, the thugs wanted to do something immoral to Su Fei's concubines. The children cried incessantly, angering the thugs. The 9-year-old child was beaten so hard that his sternum was shattered and his lungs were pierced. The youngest child fell to his death. When they found him, his body was in a twisted position. The middle child was thrown off the carriage halfway and died under the wheels of the carriage. The 3 bastard sons were all dead. Apart from Su Yanshao, the 2 concubine daughters were also on the verge of death. They had been humiliated by the thugs in the carriage and were half dead. After that, they were even beaten viciously. The 2 children didn't wait for the military doctor before they breathed their last. Their little faces turned ashen and deathly still. Yangxi looked at the 2 young girls and was silent for a while. Although the female soldiers had tidied up and covered up their faces, their dark and twisted faces still dealt a heavy blow to him. Scenes seemed to flash before his eyes. After a while, Yangxi said, "Prepare 2 coffins for them." Dragging Su Fei to death was within his and the Lord's expectations, but Yangxi stopped himself from having dangerous thoughts. He got up and left, striding into the farmyard. The soldier was still hard at work. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. His efficiency was much higher than before. "Military advisor." Yangxi laughed. "You do it, I'll watch." The soldier nodded in a daze. Just as Qin Gong had predicted, Su Bei's pursuers had discovered this place. However, they didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. Instead, they sent the news back to the main camp. After Su Bei heard this, he couldn't sit still. Does this mean that Qin Gong has already rescued Su Fei? Thinking about this, Su Bei couldn't help but feel pained. Falling into such a situation, Su Fei was still able to escape from despair and hitch a ride on Jiang Pengji's boat. Was he trying to make things difficult for him? I'm not sure about the specific situation. They had only discovered traces of Qin Gong's troops, but they weren't sure if Su Fei had been rescued by him. Su Bei held his forehead gloomily. Everyone under the tent looked at each other. Someone suggested, "Why don't the Lord send a messenger to test the waters? Wouldn't they know if Su Fei had been rescued by just a little test?" As they spoke, hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Not only was there the sound of armors colliding, but there was also the sound of clothes rubbing against each other. My lord, military advisor Han requests an audience. Su Bei's eyes lit up. He hurriedly said, quickly invite Wenbin in. Realizing that something was wrong, Han Yu rushed to the front lines without stopping. Chapter 1126. Professor Wei, the Secondary Division's principal's office is calling. Principal? The young man in the creamy white knitted casual shirt raised his head, revealing an enviable and beautiful face. His lips were slightly raised, and the faint smile seemed to dye his lacquered eyes with bright stars. Did he say what it was? He didn't say, but judging from his tone, it doesn't seem to be anything good. Please transfer the call. Okay, please hold on. Intoxicated by the young man's beauty, the assistant was momentarily dazed. He quickly returned to his senses and transferred the call. The young man accepted the call request, and the dark screen suddenly lit up, revealing the face of an unfamiliar middle-aged man. The man was in a suit with a protruding beer belly. His slightly chubby face was filled with impatience as he said something to the young man. After a while, the young man said in a cold tone, "Sorry, I'll be right there." After hanging up the call, he tidied up his desk, picked up his coat from the hanger, and put on a light gray scarf. Where are you going, Professor Wei? A colleague who passed by saw him in a hurry, looking at the bus route as he walked, and asked curiously. The young man seemed to be in a difficult position. The Federation's secondary division, but I don't know which bus to take. The colleague choked on his words. The secondary division is on the other side of the hemisphere. It'll take at least 4 hours to get there by bus. The Federation's top university was on planet Klemra, and the entire planet had 4 parts. Elementary schools, secondary schools, and advanced schools. The last one was the school district housing, where family members lived during the holidays. The young man had to cross at least half the planet to get to the secondary division from the advanced division. After listening to his colleague, the young man frowned. I'm going to the secondary division to do something, and the other party only gave me 40 minutes. The colleague said, 40 minutes, there's no rush in this world. The young man looked at his colleague quietly. The other party only gave him 40 minutes, but it would take him 4 hours to get there by bus. Was this not a rush? The colleague was also confused. He said, I saw you driving a Silver Wind Thunder X6 earlier, and it's a limited edition Silver Deluxe edition. According to the official data, it would take you at most 20 minutes to get to the secondary division from here. With this, why would you take the bus? The normal edition cost tens of millions, and this special edition cost at least 100 million. The price was secondary. The key was that this kind of limited edition was only available to certain people. It could not be bought without some social status. Ever since the young man drove this car to work, many young teaching assistants became even more enthusiastic towards him. He could even afford a sports car worth hundreds of millions. But this young man actually liked to take public transport? Sure enough, poverty limited his imagination. The youth said, I don't have a driver's license, so I can't drive. Previously, it was in autopilot mode, but this mode has a speed limit. With the autopilot mode activated, the speed of the sports car would be limited to the minimum, and it would be able to drive according to the predetermined route without a driver. Her colleague had an idea and suggested, I have a driver's license. I'll take you there. The young man smiled apologetically. Then I'll have to trouble you. His colleague looked calm on the surface, but he was wild with joy in his heart. A limited edition sports car worth hundreds of millions. He had only seen it on the virtual network and had never touched it. After driving it for a bit, he found that the car's performance was far more terrifying than the official data. His colleague immediately thought of modifying it. Have you modified your sports car? The hover sports car steadily stopped at the parking lot, and the young man prepared to get off. My wife modified it. She's quite interested in it. His colleague was speechless. Didn't the official say that the limited edition Silver Tempest X6 is infinitely close to the military's tank configuration? The young man smiled. I'm not sure about that. She said that the original car was too fragile and had poor defense, so she modified it to be thicker. His colleague looked speechlessly at the Silver Tempest X6 in front of him. The perfect lines of the car made people fall in love at first sight. The reason for the modification was actually poor defense? Could it be that the young man was the son of a high-ranking official? His colleague was secretly puzzled. The young man did not understand the secondary division at all. Without his colleague's help, he would not have been able to find his destination. The verification procedures in the principal's office were a little troublesome. Without his colleague's help, the young man would probably be obstructed for a while. I really don't know which planet you came from before. You don't even know how to use these basic instruments, his colleague muttered in a low voice. The young man smiled gently. Not only was he not angry, but he also studied seriously. After entering the office, the principal's words reached their ears. Wait, Song, your parents aren't here yet? The young man heard his mischievous son snort unhappily. I'm sorry, Mr. Principal, I'm late. The young man smiled faintly. May I know what mistake my son made? He spoke in a genteel manner, but because he was a professor of ancient culture who specialized in ancient history, no one said anything. You are. The principal looked at the young man and asked, You're Wei Song's father? Based on appearance alone, the young man and Wei Song were indeed somewhat similar. He looked more like an elder brother than a father. The young man nodded and asked honestly, Yes, do I need to show my paternity certificate? The principal's smile froze and he said stiffly, No need. His colleague was flustered. The mysterious professor of the Federation's top institution of higher learning. Married with a child? Suddenly, this colleague felt that there was hope for him to get out of singlehood. Now that the young man was married, wouldn't Yen Yen, who had a crush on him, give up? Just as he was thinking, the couple standing at the side interrupted. You're this child's father? Their attitude was a little rude and unreasonable, and their faces were angry. The young man gently raised his hand and patted his bratty son, who had just reached his shoulder. He was not angry at the couple's attitude at all. He was unbelievably gentle. Yes, I'm his father. The principal didn't explain in detail just now, so I don't know what happened. The two of them sized up the young man. The young man was dressed very casually. All of them were ordinary brands with affordable prices. However, he had a good temperament, so his clothes exuded the air of luxury. I hope you can educate your son well. His conduct is not worthy of studying at the top institution of higher learning in the Federation. The man opposite him glanced at Wei Tsong contemptuously and said, Stealing is a very despicable act. Refusing to admit it is even more unforgivable. The principal added, If this matter is true, Wei Tsong will be criticized by the entire school and punished with expulsion. A trace of surprise flashed in the young man's eyes as he looked down at his son, who had just entered puberty. Although this child was a little bratty, he would not do such a thing. What happened? I don't know either. That kid snatched my mecha model for no reason and even accused me of stealing. Wei Tsong was very angry, but his father's many years of guidance allowed him to suppress the anger surging in his heart. Why would the top institution hire a liar who's full of lies? The young man frowned slightly and said indifferently, I believe my son's words. He wouldn't do such a thing. Everything requires evidence. If Mr. Principal or this couple can produce concrete evidence, such as stealing surveillance footage, I will personally educate them. The man said, That's impossible, because the theft happened in the bathroom of the training cabin. That's a surveillance blind spot. The young man laughed and said, If that's the case, how can you be sure that my son stole some mecha model? The man was enraged as well. Before he could speak, the young man who had shrunk to the side spoke up, mumbling, That mech model is the latest limited edition model. My dad pulled some strings and spent over 5 million to buy it. Other than the difference in scale, every function is modeled after a real battle mecha. There's even a unique code on it. I lost the model, and Wei Tsong obtained a model with the same code. Although there was no surveillance footage, was there a need to guess? Wei Tsong laughed angrily. You're twisting words and forcing logic. You're slandering me without evidence. You're going too far. The young man said, Are you going to say that your family bought the mecha model in your hand? Wei Tsong suppressed his anger. So what if it is? A person who can afford a mecha that costs over 5 million credits is wearing a t-shirt that costs over 200 credits. You're discriminating too much. What's wearing a t-shirt that costs over 200 credits to you? You're just a commoner. With your family situation, you probably can barely afford the tuition fees, right? Wei Song could not hold back his temper and took a step forward. The young man raised his hand and placed it on his shoulder, pulling him back. Wei Song, who had been raging just a moment ago, was now extremely obedient. The young man said, "What's with the model?" Wei Song shrunk his neck and whispered, "Isn't it about to start the mecha course? It's still a few years before I can really learn how to pilot, so I secretly asked my sister for help. Who knew that I just received the goods today, and not long after I played with them, this guy would go crazy and say that I stole his stuff. He was being wronged." The young man sneered. "You said your sister bought it for you? Let your sister come over and confront us," Wei Song said. "Are you stupid? Wait for my sister to come over. Why are you so thick-skinned?" The young man was furious. There must be some misunderstanding in this matter. Seeing the two teenagers quarreling over this, the young man frowned unhappily. What misunderstanding can there be? The school doesn't accept people with a criminal record of theft. Wei Song, it's better to call your mother over and settle the withdrawal procedures together. The young man snorted. "I can settle this privately. If you voluntarily withdraw from school, this matter won't be recorded in your file. How about that?" The young man did not go overboard. Although Wei Song stole his favorite model, he could let bygones be bygones now that the item was back. Wei Song was just a commoner student. If he was recorded in the secondary department of the best university, he would not be able to find a job in the future. What's the model number? I'll ask Yen and find out what's going on. 2012 XSD 3611. The same model as WarGod 1253G. The young man glanced at Wei Song's father. He was not as angry as he was at first because of his good looks. Since Wei Song said his sister bought it, there must be a receipt, right? If you can produce evidence to prove that the model in his hand is indeed his, then I can apologize to him. Although he said that, he did not believe that Wei Song could produce evidence. The young man noted it down and opened his communicator to send a message to his daughter. After a while, the message came back. "Mom threw it to me a few days ago. I gave it to Song in passing. Where did the receipt come from?" The young man secretly had a headache. He pulled up his wife's contact avatar and roughly explained the current situation. He replied instantly, "What the hell? Song stole? Wait a minute." After a while, someone's communicator rang. Everyone looked at each other. The principal nodded apologetically in slight embarrassment. It was an unfamiliar video call request. Seeing this, the young man said, "Mr. Principal, you can answer it. If I'm not mistaken, it should be my wife." "What the hell?" The principal agreed to the video call in surprise. Because it was a three-dimensional communication, the person would not appear on a two-dimensional plane. Instead, it would be directly projected into a three-dimensional image. "Hello, Mr. Principal." As soon as the person spoke, everyone in the principal's office was silent. Hello Jiang. Well, I'm in a bit of a hurry. Let's cut to the chase and get straight to the point. Jiang Pengji said, "I just heard from my husband that my son stole. The evidence is true, so it's very likely that he will be expelled from the school. He might even be recorded. Is this true?" The principal was stunned. Not only him, but everyone else was also stunned. They could understand every word the chief said, but when combined into one sentence, they could not understand it. Evidence is important when doing things. Is there a surveillance camera or a witness? The principal blushed and said with difficulty, "No." Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. "Since there is no evidence, why did you say that Song stole?" The principal glanced at the young man's parents. Their expressions were very interesting, like a broken pallet. Faced with the questioning of the chief, the principal did not dare to be vague, not to mention that the chief was the most difficult old hooligan to deal with. The principal explained the reason rather awkwardly. Although it was beautified, it could not hide from Jiang Pengji's eyes. "I think the atmosphere of the top school should be changed. The school is a place for students to seek knowledge. How can there be class discrimination? If this matter is broadcasted by the military media or the civilian media, I think the top school will be on the hot search list for a few days." The principal choked and was speechless. Could this kind of thing be linked to discrimination? The school was already relatively fair. The teaching resources they could provide could also be enjoyed by children from ordinary backgrounds, but children from wealthy families could enjoy more top-notch resources. These resources could not even be provided by the school, let alone for ordinary children. For example, the simulated mecha this time. This kind of mecha model was not a toy on the market. Other than the scale and weapon power, everything else was made according to real war mecha. Even if you had money, you could not buy it. Children with power and money could learn in advance, but could ordinary children? Chief, there must be a misunderstanding in this matter. Of course I know there's a misunderstanding. Jiang Pengji smiled. Song would not steal a classmate's mecha model, and he does not have a hobby of stealing. There is no doubt about this. Because the mecha model was made according to my former ride, the manufacturer gave me 2 sets as souvenirs. There is no possibility of it being fake. I have already contacted the manufacturer to investigate the serial number, and various certificates can prove that the one in my hands is real. I have a rude suggestion. You'd better check if the lost mecha model is a high-quality imitation. The principal only felt his cheeks blush. The youth's parents could not help but suspect that they had bought a high-quality imitation at a high price. After all, it was impossible for a dignified chief to buy a high-quality imitation from official channels. I'm sorry, Chief. This is my fault. I did not investigate in detail and wrongly accused young Master Wei. The youth's father could not help but speak up, trying to save some face. Regarding the lost mecha model, I will investigate carefully. I will not wrongly accuse anyone. Jiang Pengji smiled. It's okay. It's good that this matter has been resolved. Wei Tsong could not hold it in any longer. Just a series of apologies was enough? He had been wrongly accused for a few hours. The teachers and principal took turns to meet him, and all of them accused him of stealing. Hadn't he just insulted him with his eyes and nose, mocking him for wearing a cheap t-shirt that cost 200 credits? Although Tsong is young, he is still a young man. This gentleman should be able to understand what it's like to have a bratty son with strong self-esteem at home. Jiang Pengji seemed to sense Wei Tsong's resentment and added with a smile. The gentleman immediately understood. Of course I can understand. After this matter is investigated, I will solemnly apologize to young Master Wei and compensate for the mental damage. Wei Tsong was still a little angry, but after a few snorts, he wilted. He lowered his head and secretly rejoiced. He was satisfied that his mother could take time out of her busy schedule to help him solve a trivial matter. The matter was not complicated, but before Jiang Pengji revealed her identity, Wei Tsong was determined to be a commoner student. A commoner student holding a mecha model worth more than 5 million would make any normal person think that it was of unknown origin. The other party's attitude was more rude and unreasonable. They insisted on their own judgment, so Wei Tsong was naturally at a disadvantage. Now that the positions were reversed, the previously arrogant person could not be arrogant anymore. After careful investigation, they finally found the lost mecha model. After the manufacturer's appraisal, the lost model was indeed a high-quality imitation. The one in Wei Tsong's hand was the real one. The youth apologized to Wei Tsong accompanied by his parents. You're the son of His Excellency the Commander? The youth was still very confused. Yes, is it strange? Then why are you dressed so shabbily? Which proper young master would dress so intimately? Wei Tsong choked and retorted, My dad likes to shop online. Not happy? I can also wear a shabby t-shirt like this, okay? The youth was embarrassed and ashamed. Fortunately, Wei Tsong did not pursue the matter for revenge, so they were in peace. On the other side, the youth's colleague was dumbstruck and could not react for a long time. The mysterious professor who usually did not bat an eyelid was actually the man of the infamous commander? The flowers in the school who coveted the youth. Did these people know who their love rivals were? You and His Excellency the Commander are. The youth laughed. We are husband and wife. A secret marriage? No, but she and I don't like to receive too much attention from the outside world, not to mention that our child is still young. The colleague was already speechless. That sports car. She bought it for me to travel to work. Ah Tsong's temperament is a bit awkward and he's in puberty. I'm worried about him, so I followed him to Klemla so that it's convenient to take care of him. The youth smiled and squinted his eyes. Don't tell anyone about this. She's been in a bad mood lately because I've been paying too much attention to Atsong and neglected her. If there are any related reports, I'm afraid she'll cause trouble. The corner of the colleague's mouth twitched. He'd be crazy to spread gossip about the commander. I definitely won't. There was no need to mention how uncomfortable it felt to have a secret that others did not know. The matter seemed to have been resolved, but not long after, the principal was demoted. He issued a series of documents to rectify the school's atmosphere. The group of students' parents was baffled. Only the person involved knew the inside story. 6 years later, Wei Tsong finished his secondary and higher school courses and graduated a few years ahead of schedule. At the graduation ceremony, the commander of the 7th Army, Her Excellency Jiang Pengji, attended as a special guest and awarded the graduation certificates to the student representatives. After the formal award of certificates, there were other entertainment programs. Jiang Pengji got off the stage and said to Wei Tsong, "Well done." Wei Tsong straightened his chest. "I'm a little biased towards certain subjects. Combat subjects barely hold me back. I don't recommend you to enter the combat ranks. Consider a civilian position." Wei Tsong's face drooped. "Your sister already gave you a handicap of 9 fingers, but you still couldn't beat her. If you join the battle, you'll just be sending yourself to the enemy." Wei Tsong immediately looked like a frostbitten eggplant. He was completely drained of energy. "How do you know I can't do it if you don't try?" The headmaster of the advanced department was dumbfounded as he listened to their conversation. Seeing Wei Tsong contradict Jiang Pengji, he tried to smooth things over by apologizing to Jiang Pengji on Wei Tsong's behalf. "Army commander this," Jiang Pengji said good-naturedly. "Tsong is throwing a tantrum. I've made a fool of myself in front of the principal." "Tsong? Wasn't that a little too intimate?" The principal of the advanced department was dumbfounded. "Wei Tsong is His Excellency's relative?" The conversation between the two was broadcasted to the virtual network. Because it was a routine graduation broadcast every year, there weren't many viewers at the beginning. It was a cliché. It was the same routine every year. It was annoying to watch too much. However, the more the audience listened, the more they felt that something was wrong. Their thoughts were perfectly synchronized with the principal's. "My son," Jiang Pengji said. "Oh, so it's His Excellency's son." As the principal spoke, his expression froze. "Son." The audience watching the live broadcast also exploded. The army commander's son? That wasn't right. When did she get married? Who was she marrying? Everyone had the same question. As if to answer their doubts, an extremely good-looking young man entered the range of the camera. "Dad, I'm here." As soon as Wei Tsong opened his mouth, the bullet screen exploded. "Don't push me. Let me see who the father of the 7th Army's crown prince is. Oh my God, my goddess is actually married. Her child is about to enlist in the army. Are you kidding me? This year's media can't do it. Upstairs, are you stupid? Even if you gave those paparazzi 10 million heads, they wouldn't dare to follow and secretly take pictures of the big shots in the military, right? The crown prince is so good-looking. He's so good-looking. The boss's man is good-looking too. I don't think he's had plastic surgery. Oh my God, Jiang Pengji, this scourge, is finally single. Can I find a lady in the army who's willing to let me take over?" The bullet screen audience quickly attracted the attention of others when they called the army commander's name directly. But in the next second, he deleted the bullet screen and continued to lurk. Cheering for the army commander. He's the army commander now. When the next marshal election is held, he'll be the marshal, right? That's for sure. The current army commanders are either too old or too inexperienced. None of them can fight. He's the army commander's man now. He'll be the marshal's man in the future. Did this man save the human alliance in his previous life? Looking at the boss's resume, she really has a cheat life. Speaking of which, her surname is Jiang. Teskeske. I can't help but think of a certain family. I also think of a certain family. Yes, I have the same feeling. A certain unspeakable family. You guys are so weird. Our army commander came up on his own. There are many people with the surname Jiang in the world. What are you jealous of? Not long after, the bullet screen was quickly cleared. Regardless of the media's trending topics, Jiang Pengji looked in the direction of the young man with a smile. Chapter 1127. After much anticipation, Han Yu had finally arrived. However, when he saw Han Yu in person, Su Bei felt guilty for no reason. "Greetings, my lord." Han Yu cupped his hands in front of his chest. The atmosphere in the tent dropped to a freezing point. Everyone could tell that Han Yu was in a terrible mood. Su Bei helped Han Yu up and said earnestly, "Wenbin, you really made me wait. It is my fault that I failed to solve your problems for you. I do not dare to accept your highness's kindness." Han Yu's face was cold and his voice was stiff. Those who knew him well knew that he was angry. Su Bei happened to be that familiar person. "Wenbin is so angry. You must be angry with me," Su Bei said embarrassedly. "No matter what, you should at least let me know what I did wrong." A traitor would be sentenced to death if no reason was given. Prisoners on death row also had human rights. "Everyone makes mistakes." Han Yu spoke. Su Bei secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Before he could relax, Han Yu continued, "However, the mistakes of the Lord can still be forgiven. The mistakes of the advisor cannot be forgiven. The advisor did not fulfill his duty and did not think about remonstrating. Isn't that a dereliction of duty? Allowing the Lord to go astray is adding to the mistakes and crimes on top of the crimes. I have made a mistake. Please punish me, my lord. I will not complain." If they didn't listen to the last sentence, Han Yu was clearly dissing all the advisors in the tent. He changed the topic and put all the blame on himself. The other advisors were speechless. The feeling of wanting to vomit blood and choking on his lungs was unbearable. Everyone knew that Han Yu was dissing them by name, but they couldn't refute him. After all, he was the one who said he was wrong. Why would an outsider take the blame? Was he thinking too highly of himself? Su Bei blushed. He didn't care what mistakes he had made. The most important thing was to pacify Han Yu first. Since he had already lowered his head and admitted his mistakes, Han Yu naturally couldn't hold on to it. He gave Su Bei a way out. An official relied on the Lord's trust and favor to be arrogant. This wasn't having a backbone, it was called having a problem. Su Bei said, "Fortunately, Wenbin is here. I feel at ease now." Every lord was proficient in the art of sweet-talking. Her methods of coaxing people were profound and numerous, like a sow wearing a bra, one set after another. Jiang Pengji? That was a special case. Her words of love had a unique attribute, and it was bound to be picked up. "I've been rushing all the way here, but the information I've received is not detailed. But there's one thing." Han Yu paused and said bluntly, "I think you've been a little reckless in your actions, and you've lost your composure as a master." Lu Shi borrowed troops to support Su Fei. Why did Lord send troops to help Lu Shi? Su Pei was dumbfounded. When did he help Lu Shi? Why does Wenbin say that? Han Yu said, "Lu Shi saved Su Fei." "My lord, just let him save her. Aren't you helping Lu Shi by forcing Mountain Urn City to fall?" Su Bei almost couldn't breathe. There was something wrong with this logic. Han Yu continued to analyze. Su Fei is not a good person. Lu Shi saved him, but he saved a hot potato. "My lord, if you stop at the right time, you will be able to fulfill your brotherhood with Su Fei. This will prevent people from saying that my lord is heartless. The internal strife between brothers is, after all, a family matter. Lu Shi helped, but my lord didn't intend to kill Su Fei. Her actions will be labeled as a vile person who instigated strife between brothers. My lord can even write a declaration of war against Lu Shi, which is a righteous cause. If Lu Shi were to send troops, it would be a nameless army, and it would be no different to morale. But now, my lord has disregarded our brotherhood and attacked Mountain Urn City by force. You can't escape the label of heartless." War was a must, but there was a big difference between sending troops with a good reason and sending troops without a good reason. Su Bei's actions of attacking Mountain Urn City by force had handed over the initiative to start the war. He could only hope that Su Fei was fine. Otherwise, Su Bei would be slandered by the treacherous old hooligan Lu Shi and be labeled as a murderer. Internal strife between brothers was not uncommon, but it was rare for bloodshed to occur. The Dongqing royal family's nest of weirdos didn't count. Su Bei felt that Han Yu's words were somewhat familiar, as if he had heard them somewhere before. He glanced around the military tent and saw Chung Sun sitting upright on the mat. He couldn't help but feel remorseful. Does Wenbin have a plan to break out of this situation? Su Bei was obedient and humbly asked for advice. Han Yu said, "If my lord can shake hands with Su Fei and treat him well, this situation will collapse on its own." Shake hands and make peace? Su Bei's expression stiffened. This request was really too much. He would rather fight with Su Fei for another 300 rounds. When 1,000 people are of one heart, they can gain the strength of 1,000 people. When 10,000 people are not of one heart, none of them will work alone. My lord and Su Fei are from the same faction, and both of them are of the same lineage. If they can let go of their former enmity and help each other hand in hand, with the two of them working together as one, why worry about the hegemony? The Su family won't prosper? Han Yu wouldn't have said these words in the past. It would have been useless even if he had said it. The two brothers were like cross-eyed men. Which one could he persuade? Now that my lord's power had crushed Su Fei and pushed him to the bottom of the valley, there was a possibility for both sides to forcefully cooperate. If he could solve the current situation of the Su brothers being at loggerheads and end the internal strife of the Su family, it would be a blessing in disguise. Thinking of this, Han Yu really wanted to greet the grandfather of the Su brothers. It was one thing to be biased, but to cause fratricide and internal strife in the family because of it was biased, this was a completely different matter. Su Bei felt awkward for a while, but he couldn't just reject Han Yu's suggestion. He could only use the tactic of delaying to send Han Yu away first, and then he could go back to his nest to think about the gains and losses. Unexpectedly, before Su Bei could decide whether or not to bury the hatchet with Su Fei, a sudden piece of bad news came. Su Fei is gone. Su Bei's eyes widened in shock. His right hand gripped the messenger's shoulder tightly and he cried out, "What did you say? Who's dead?" Su. The messenger's heart was filled with anxiety. Seeing that Su Bei's attitude was not right, he corrected himself, "Your lord is dead." "How did he die?" Su Bei seemed to be unable to accept it. The messenger replied, "He hanged himself." Han Yu's expression changed drastically. If he was killed, he could still say that someone's soldiers killed him by mistake and manipulate public opinion to wash away the stain on his name. But if he hanged himself, it would mean that he was forced into a hopeless situation and begged for death. It was obvious who forced him to do it. Han Yu was overwhelmed with shock, but his mind was exceptionally clear. Not only did he have to worry about Jiang Pengji's soldiers, but he also had to worry about Jiang Pengji's slander. "Where's the corpse?" Su Bei asked. The messenger replied, "Your lord's corpse has been collected by his eldest daughter." Su Bei heaved a sigh of relief, but Han Yu, who was at the side, was frightened out of his wits. If the father hanged himself, the person who collected the corpse should not be his wife or son. Why was it his eldest daughter? Unless, as he was thinking, the messenger's voice came from outside. "Report. There's a messenger outside the camp requesting an audience." Su Bei said, "Let him in." Chang Yuan volunteered to be the messenger and went to Su Bei's camp. Yang Si felt that it was too dangerous, but Chang Yuan made him relent with one sentence. "When two armies are at war, Su Bei is not the lord if the messenger is not executed." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.